Welcome, everyone, to a fresh edition of Draft on Tap with Danny Shiman. It is the eve of the NFL Draft 2025. But unfortunately, we have to start today's show with some sad news, Danny. You heard it. Our guy, Steve McMichael, has passed away. Tell me, what do you remember most about Steve, Danny?
Yeah, I mean that's obviously, Steve's been in bad shape for a while now, but what I remember most about him, man, it's that the '85 team. Obviously, that's the first thing you think about, right? They had the star power, right, with Peyton and Hampton and Dent and obviously McMahon and Willie Gaul and all the guys. But man, I think Steve McMichael is one of the more underrated players on that team, on that defensive line, to be honest with you. And of all those superstar and Hall of Famers I just mentioned, the one guy I'd be scared to run into a dark alley with in front of would be Steve McMichael. I mean, not that he's a mean guy, but just like someone, if you catch him on a bad day, would whip your ass in a heartbeat. And growing up watching, some of our audience listeners may remember this. He did a Sunday night show with Mark Gene Grucko on local NBC5 affiliate here in Chicago, and that was just to must-watch TV, and just to see if he was going to show up drunk or if he was going to what he was going to do to Gene Greco in terms of I don't know, embarrass him, but some way, one way or another. I mean, I think a couple of times he did something in terms of put stuff in his hair or something like that. I forgot what it was like.
I have a clip of it. This is how every night during the 1991 season on Sunday nights, McMichael was a guest on Gene Greco's Sports Sunday show, and this was the opening to the show, which shows highlights of what Danny was talking about.
From the NBC Tower, this is Sports Sunday, the complete wrap-up of today's action around the NFL. Sports Sunday with Mark Gene Greco and the Bears' Steve McMichael.
Now it's time to have some fun. I get 200 times a day. The bread snaps on my toes. No one can tell me what to do, because it's my show, that's right. Because it's my show, yes it is. It's my show.
Hi everybody, welcome again to Sports Sunday. Yours truly and Porky.
Mark, have you ever seen the movie Deliverance?
You've got
a pretty mouth.
Classic moments with Mongo McMichael, and obviously some of the things they got away with on TV. They couldn't get away with nowadays on TV. But it was, like I said, it was win, lose or draw. It was must see TV at night to see what Mongo would do to Gene Greco. And I admit, man, I gotta give props to Gene Greco, man. He was a great sport about it. He took a lot of, like, you saw some of the stuff there. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's some of the stuff that Aldo didn't get to and show, but man, it was just, again, must see TV, and that's what I really remember about him. Is just, he was just like a larger than life personality, and then obviously, once he left here, went to the Packers. I think that was like a big kind of a punch to the gut here for Bears fans, and then obviously when he retired, went to the world of professional wrestling. But again, it was just a big kind of like a teddy bear when he wanted to be, but also could be, his nickname was Texas Rattlesnake. I mean, that's he could be something like that as well. So, he's finally resting. Obviously a long battle with ALS, and he's finally up there with the rest of the other his teammates from the 85 team, and he's finally can get to rest. But at least the good news is at least he got into the Hall of Fame. This past summer, and he goes out a Hall of Famer.
Yeah. It was announced in 2021 that he had contacted ALS, which is also known as Lou Gehrig's disease. And as anyone who is familiar with that disease, it is just degenerative and your body just starts to decay. And for the last year or so, he needed help breathing. He needed a voice enhancer thing to help him communicate. He was just in really bad shape. And Dan Pompei, who is scheduled to be Greg's guest on Monday, which is perfect. He won't be with us Monday if the funeral is Monday, but if he's available, he will be joining us. And he knows McMichael's career left and right, up and down. And he wrote at The Athletic that two things were remarkable about the way he dealt with ALS. The first was his grace. The second was his toughness. When he could still speak, a group of his former teammates visited him. One told him how sorry they all were. And then he said, "It's a good thing this happened to me and not one of you sons of bitches, because I'm the only one who could handle it." They all nodded, they chuckled, and they cried. So that's Dan Pompei. I think he captures that. We will reschedule Cliff if he's not available. But Dan Pompei, Hall of Fame, Pro Football Hall of Fame writer, captures that moment with Steve and just Steve McMichael, period. So it's over at The Athletic. If you guys are subscribers, you can check that out. And hopefully Pompei will be with us on Monday. Anything else you want to say about Steve, Danny?
No, it's just like I said. It's finally arrested. It was a long struggle. I'm happy that he made it into the Hall of Fame. I'm happy that he went out a Hall of Famer. Now he can just rest. May he rest in peace.
Indeed. And I should say also that Mike North, who does a show here on the channel called Somebody Big Just Died, he will do his tribute to Steve McMichael on Saturday at 8 p.m. after our draft coverage. And he and Joe Mandel will be hosting that. And of course, Mike has some great stories to share about Steve McMichael when Mike was the sportscaster radio guy for WSCR. They had a number of interesting chats that he's going to share. And by the way, Mike North is being honored for a Lifetime Achievement Award. We'll have more on that later, but I just want to stick with McMichael and say throughout our draft coverage, the guests that will come in, I'm sure we'll talk about McMichael. So the tributes to McMichael from this channel and the people associated with this channel will continue to happen throughohout the weekend.
The one thing I would like to see, and I know it's hard because they have so many numbers retired, but I would like to see them retire McMichael's number if possible. Mm-hmm. But I know they're already up against it in terms of the numbers already have retired, but
they have to come up with something different. I've always thought that after 100 years that the number has been retired, then you could award the number to another player, something like that, because eventually a lot of players who deserve to have their number retired, like Steve McMichael, don't get that privilege. Doug Buffon, in my opinion, number 55. And I'm not saying that because John is associated with the Ballroom Network, but I saw him play alongside Dick Butkus. He was truly one of the greatest. I've always wondered that maybe he said some things to piss off the McCaskey family because he was very blunt, Buffon was, in his assessment of how bad the Bears teams were. But my overall point is, they have to figure out a way to honor these players, but by having their number retired or some other way, and right. Maybe just a time length of 100 years for a retirement is an answer. I don't know.
Or maybe like when the new stadium is built, maybe like some sort of ring of honor. Yeah. Where they there it goes, right? Dr. Truth right there, right on cue right there. Ring of honor going across, the stadium facade or whatever you want to call it. But and then instead of retiring a number, you just put the player into the Bears Hall of Fame and Ring of Honor or whatever. I think Dallas does it, and a bunch of other franchise. I think the Packers might do it as well, if I'm not mistaken. But
Steelers,
a bunch of franchise, Colts I know do it as well. So a bunch of franchise do it. That'd be nice to at least that way you can honor the player, and then also have the current players utilize a number if they want to.
All right, so that's our tribute to Steve McMichael. He will forever be in our hearts. Let's turn our attention now to the NFL draft. Danny, we got so many things to cover. One of the things that I'm excited is sharing your top 10 lists of the players. Is that what's next on our rundown? I don't even know.
You're running the show, my friend.
I know. I'm running the show, and I don't know what I'm doing. It is the top 10 list. So Danny put together top 10 lists of players. And again, Danny's focus this entire draft offseason has been players that could potentially be good fits for the Chicago Bears in need areas. So he's not going to give you a top 10 list for quarterbacks because we got one. We got a pretty good one. But he is for the positions of need. And one of those positions, let's start first with Danny's top 10 running backs. We'll talk about it. But first, I want to share the video that we created. Here it is, Danny Shimon's top 10 running backs. There you see the names up along on the screen alongside Danny. Danny, my question for you is, was it tough when you got to 8, 9, 10, was it tough for you? Because this is a deep running back class. Yeah. Were there some names that you say, man, how can I squeeze this guy in? Should I do an 11?
And then I was better. And again, just a little more context, Aldo did a great job of explaining it, but I just want to add one more thing here is these are guys that I see fitting the Bears and they're what I envision as a scheme that they're going to be running here and a complement to DeAndre Swift. So, some names might be lower than what people expect. Some might be higher than what people expect. But yes, I'll answer your question. Like I remember number 11, I was battling back and forth with LaQuint Allen and Trevor Etienne. And, Allen is a guy that I really do like, the kid out of Syracuse. Gives you some pass catching ability. He's more of a taller, linear type of runner. I just love the way Etienne where he bounces in between traffic and in between the tackles. I think I like his vision a little bit better, so that's why I gave Etienne a little bit more of a uptick there and put him at number 10. But yeah, it's a deep, talented running back class, which obviously the top guy, Genty, obviously to me he's the best running back in the class. But yet, all the stuff that I talked about. Don't draft a running back in the first round, especially don't trade up and give up assets to get a running back. And I wouldn't do it personally, because you have so many needs to fill on this roster, and to be able to give up assets that can help you build the depth or even bring in some impact players next year for a running back when a class is this deep. It for me would be something that I wouldn't do. Now I know. In terms of between Genty and my number 2 guy, Myron Hampton, there's a difference there, right? In terms of, ability. Mainly, it's a vision to weave and bounce through traffic, and that's the one thing Genty has is that the ability to set his blocks up, cut off his blocks. Not that the other guys don't have it, but just at the level that Genty has it, and obviously everyone talks about his contact balance and power. To be able to bounce off of defenders and just continue to churn yards. So, that's the difference there. But is it the difference that I would give up, let's say, the 39th pick in the second round to move up a couple of spots to get him? I wouldn't do it because, again, in the second round with that 39th pick, I can grab a guy maybe like a Quinshon Judkins who, might not have the elite vision that Genty has, but has good vision, right? And he can also run with contact and run through arm tackles. And he might not have the contact power and balance that Genty does. Genty likes to bounce off of guys. Junkins likes to run through guys, to be honest with you. But I just think that, like to give up the 39th pick or something like that to move up a couple spots, I just think you'd be better suited to stay at where you're at right now and pick up a back in the second round and go from there. So yeah, these are my guys. I think we've discussed every single one of these guys. Well, at some point on any one of these Draft on Tap shows, and I've highlighted the strengths of all of them. Even like a guy like DJ Giddens and Trevion Henderson, a little bit lower than on my list than some others. Not because I don't think he's talented, but I just think he's more of a similar type of back to a DeAndre Swift. Not a perfect complement, if you will. He's another back that likes to bounce things, runs to the outside. He's got that big home run hitting ability, pretty damn good pass catching back, and also pretty good pass protection as well. So that's why Henderson's a little bit lower, just because I don't think he's a perfect complement. But I don't think he's talented enough like the other guys. I just the fit there, I like it better with some of the other guys, paired with Swift.
Hugh Heavens wants to know why no on Cameron Scatterboo.
Yeah, another one of those talented guys that was right there. It's a deep class, Hugh, and Scatterboo for me is a guy that last year, this past season had a initial year. 2 years ago was a guy that was told by his coaching staff, hey, you got to lose weight, get in shape, because if not, that this offense is going to move on past you. And obviously, to his credit, he did that. Got in, had a great season, but. I just kind of go back and forth and look at some of the strengths and some of the weaknesses. And the overall ability of each one of these players for me ranks higher at this point right now than Cam Scatterboo. And again, I'll talk about like Quinn Allen. He was a guy from Syracuse that I liked a lot. And I battled back and forth between him and Trevor Etienne. Allen's taller back, 6'1", I think 6 feet, 205 pounds. Etienne's more of a smaller back. But I just like, again, breaking down their tape. The vision, the sense to be able to cut off his blocks. I just like Etienne and what he did also in the Georgia and in terms of SEC and all that stuff, and that also played a big role too. So it was a tough list to put through. This group here, but someone had to go, unfortunately, and a couple of guys didn't make it.
One of the guys that didn't make it is a guy that I'm just been studying the last 2-3 days and growing more and more in love with him because of the speed element, is Jaden Blue. Tell me what you think of Jaden Blue, and would you be upset or happy if the Bears drafted Jaden Blue?
Yeah, we discussed Jaden Blue. He was one of your day 3 gems, and at 5'9", 196, he's a weapon, right? He's an offensive weapon. He's got that elite game breaking speed. Give him a little crease there in the offensive line. He's got that burst to be able to get through there and take it to the house. So he's a home run waiting to happen. But at 5'9", 196. He's not a bell cow type of running back. And again, talk about a guy that does more of his damage towards the outside as opposed to running in between the tackles. Now that's where I think he's not the perfect complement here for DeAndre Swift. So that's why but if you bring him in, right, if you're lucky enough to get him in day 3 somehow, he's a weapon, right? And just like how Ben Johnson talked about, when they drafted Jahmyr Gibbs in Detroit, he was more of Jahmyr Gibbs, sorry, he was more of a weapon as opposed to a running back. And I think that's the thing with Blue as well, is you could utilize him as a weapon here, in the system as opposed to a bell cow type of running back. And that's kind of what his size really is what kind of eliminated him from contention.
I am going to offer an opinion, and it just came to mind. It was reminded to me by Dr. Truth, who writes, I was worried about a bit about Genty because he strikes me as a bit arrogant, but with Eric Bieniemy as our running back coach, he will whip his ass into shape if there are any issues. Here's what I have learned about Genty over the last week, which to me really increases his value. He is the son of a highly decorated military man who has moved around the country, and in every stop that Ashton Genty has had, including in Italy, He worked out for the football teams, made the football teams, and played at a very high level. He has all the characteristics that his dad has in terms of self-discipline, of responsibility, and all those character traits. Every time I've seen him talk Dr. Truth, I haven't seen him at all sound arrogant, in my opinion. In fact, he has just highly impressed me. And so because of that, Danny, I think that when you add in his special talents as a running back and you add in the type of person that he is and the type of leader that he is, he might be a guy that the Chicago Bears might want to trade up for. What do you think?
Yeah, in terms of off the field, the couple of people I've talked to is like this is the cleanest prospect in the draft in terms of on the field, off the field. There is no, from what I've heard, from what I've gathered, there is no issues in terms of him being arrogant or having some sort of cocky attitude or anything like that. I don't know exactly what Dr. Truth is referring to. I don't know if it's a letter he penned to the GM saying that, in terms of, selling himself and saying that, he's a guy that no one can tackle. That's just the confidence that the guy has. And all the interviews I've seen him, have on TV, he's like a well-mannered and respectful young man. And again, I've been told by multiple people that he is the cleanest prospect in this entire draft class. So take it for what that's worth there.
Yeah, and Little Wasted says that was the article that rubbed people wrong, as you just said. So I have not read the article, so I really can't comment on that. But I don't know. I think that this guy might be a high character guy. Let's listen to what Ian Cunningham and Ryan Poles said that might give us a clue as to what they are doing. First of all, it's Ryan Poles talking about when he was asked about the big pool at number 10.
With 2 days to go, how large is the pool of players you're looking at right now for pick 10?
Yeah, there's a large pool of very good football players, and then I think you can do some different things to get more players that are going to be able to come in and help your team quickly.
Danny, how did you read that?
One thing, and I've said it multiple times, guys, to me, Ryan Poles is a different person since the hiring of Ben Johnson. I wonder if you guys, he's no longer nervous and fidgety and just looks uncomfortable up there. And I'm like, he's relaxed and he's got the nice blazer going, looking a little fly there. It looks like he might have dropped a little weight there as well. And I don't know, he's got that little smile. That grin tells me there's something in the works.
Yes.
Right? Whether it's him possibly having a deal in place, if said player Genty maybe is available at a certain pick, they may ever have a deal, agreed to upon with a team, whatever. But that's just the change in terms of Ryan Poles once Ben Johnson's been brought on board has been, for me, in my opinion, just really eye-opening. And again, in terms of that comment, Aldo, your question, it just feels like there's something going on. He said it's going to be a wild night, right? And I feel like there's going to be things that are going to surprise us, good or bad. So we have a segment coming later on with Shiman says, and I have a couple of things that I think may or may not happen. So we'll keep that for later on in the show. That's called a tease in the entertainment field. Aldo taught me that one.
That's right. Here is Ian Cunningham talking about the top tier talent in this draft.
The amount of top tier talent, while it's good, the volume isn't necessarily there. I feel like there's a few clumps of groups of players that are really good, but they're similar in terms of value, and I feel like there's good depth in certain positions.
Ian, you talk about the volume maybe not being there. So how much does position scarcity or depth play into what you might do at 10?
It plays a lot into it, just in terms of trying to anticipate where some of the drop-off is going to be, depending upon what positions we may have higher versus other positions, or, at the same position, maybe there's a larger drop-off, right? It just depends, where we're at 10 or at 39 or 41.
What does that clue you into?
Well, the first thing I want to say is Ian Cunningham was sweating up a storm there, and he had the Mike Tomlin sweats that Mike Tomlin had at the owners' meetings there. I wanted to reach into my TV and give Ian a towel, man, but I don't know if those cameras. After he had just come out of a workout and put on his suit, and all of a sudden he was in front of those hot lights and the cameras. But yeah, again, Ian Cunningham kind of reiterates there what we just kind of talked about. You know, the Bears they've earmarked one, maybe two players that they're going to try and make a move for, right? Whether it's Genty, which is who I believe, or an offensive lineman, or some other position of need. I think that's what they're trying to do is just say, hey, there are players that we have identified. And I think there's like a finite number. It's like maybe one, maybe there's two that they would do that. And then if not, if those guys are gone, I think that they're willing to say, all right, let's go and circle back and let's see who wants to come up and get our pick. And I think they'd be willing to move back 3, 4, 5 spots if they can garner, say, a 3rd round pick or something like that to move back that back and get those guys. Because again, the strength of this draft, right? It's between the middle of the 1st round towards day, late day 2 or maybe even early day 3. A lot of those players are kind of lumped up there together, and I think moving back of 3 or 4 or 5 spots, you'll still get a player where you can come in and compete, whether it's at offensive line, at tight end, at receiver, at whatever position you're looking at, defensive line, and still maybe pick up an extra 3rd round pick. It just now it takes, first step is, can we get our guy, either 1 or 2 guy, whoever it is, can we get him? If we can't, let's circle back and see if we can offload this pick and pick up an extra pick. Remember when they drafted Darnell Wright, the Eagles moved up 1 spot from 9 to 10 to take Jalen Carter. They gave him a 4th round pick. So if you're going back 5 spots, I'm assuming you at least garner a 3rd round pick in this draft. So we'll see what happens. I'm saying tomorrow is going to be very, very exciting. Stay tuned. I don't other than the first pick, maybe picks 2 and 3. I think everything, those are kind of like chalk right now. Everybody's kind of have the same names penciled in. And then when it comes to New England 4, that's when the fireworks could start. That's when teams can trade up. New England could trade back. New England go and start the run on offensive linemen there. Maybe they do a skill position player. Who knows? But I think that's where it gets fun and exciting.
All right, let us move on to your next top 10 list. Let us roll the video for, let's pick one here, Aldo. How about, where'd it go? There it is, tight end. Another great list, Danny. I want you to expound more on why Joshua Simon is on your list.
Yeah, that's something that I was looking at, and then I remember J2K, I think it was the last show or the previous show, and asked about him, and I said, he was on my list to watch, and I watch him, and he's a guy that just in terms of athletic ability just explodes. Right, he's got the a long reach with 33-inch arms. He's a guy that can stretch the field. The only thing with him, he's about 6'4", 239. Some people that I've talked to, have him earmarked as more of like the H-back type of role. So he's not going to be one of those inline tight end kind of guys that while he'll give you an honest effort, but he's going to get overpowered at the line of scrimmage at the next level. So he's more of that split joker, wide in the slot there, tight end. And yeah, you put on his tape, and he's a guy that just makes big plays down the football field. Talk about stretching the seam, talking about, again, big time, a big target with huge catch radius. You know, I'm looking at his stats right now. I'm looking at, I think, 33-inch arm length is what he had at the combine. So 33 and 7/8, has 38-inch vertical, ran a 4.65 40. Again, just an athletic freak type. You know, started his career first 4 seasons at Western Kentucky, then went last year to Southern Carolina and put up, you know, a pretty good season. Had 7 touchdowns, over 500 yards, 40 receptions, average over 13 yards of reception. So big play potential from that slot position at tight end. But again, he's in number 10 mainly because, again, I think he's more of that, you know, he's a one-trick pony kind of type. He's not a guy that probably won't be lined up inside. And I think he's a guy that, again, will be able to stretch that seam and give you another offensive firepower from that tight end position. But, you know, 6'4", 247 is what he weighed in at the combine. So, you know, is a tweener. Is he an H-back? Is he a tight end? What are you going to use him at? I think what you use him is those formations. You line him up, you scheme up and line him up against linebackers, because I think with that 4.65, the 1.58, 10-yard split, he's a guy that can take off and beat linebackers and if they're covering him one-on-one. So, again, just a guy that could bring in offensive firepower, another kind of weapon to your offense. And I went into this, guys, and I know Tyler Warren's my top tight end because he's basically the best all-around tight end in this class. But I went into this draft looking for a tight end. I was looking for someone that complements Cole Kmet, and that's something that we talked about in previous shows where bringing up Tyler Warren, he's not really a true complement to Cole Kmet. I think they're pretty similar, right? They're both inline wide tight ends. Guys that both can be pretty good pass catchers on the field. Neither one of them are really dynamic, if you will. If you're looking for more dynamic seam stretchers, the guys like Colson Loveland, Mason Taylor, Elijah Arroyo, even Terrence Ferguson for a bit could be those guys that could threaten the seam and be a little more dynamic in the passing game. Warren's going to be a solid tight end. I think Cole Kmet is a solid tight end. So I think that's why bringing in Tyler Warren, I think it for me at least, it signals that the time for Cole Kmet on this roster is coming to an end, whether it's this offseason or next offseason. I just think Tyler Warren would overtake him for the number 1 tight end spot. But I went into this process, again, looking for a complement to Cole Kmet.
J2K sends his regards. He says it's a real treat to be able to get your insight on prospects that he is a fan of. J2K would be a great candidate for you to give a T-shirt to.
Yeah, thanks for reminding me. I do have a couple weeks ago. Someone asked about a T-shirt. A couple people asked about T-shirts. I do have a T-shirt available. So if you're interested in having one of these Shiman Draft Scout T-shirts in the chat, let Aldo know. He'll take your name down, and at the end of the show, we'll put it in a raffle. And there's my model. Aldo Gandia. Doing a great job of showing off the T-shirt there, sporting that new Bears draft cap as well.
You like that?
The cap is sold separately; doesn't come with a T-shirt. So if you're interested in a Shiman Draft Scout shirt, let me know. Hit up Aldo in the chat, and he'll put your name in a grab bag, if you will, or some sort of raffle thing, and we'll plug it out. And we'll send it out to you guys.
Yeah, just let me know. You know how to get a hold of me. All right. Cliff has an outstanding question here. He says, Danny, how low would you go on this tight end list before saying, nah? Would all 10 of these guys be acceptable to you?
Yeah, it just depends where you get them, right, Cliff?
Right.
So obviously the first round guys are Warren, and Colson Loveland. To me, even Mason Taylor, if you get him in the lower half of the first round, is a good get. Arroyo, I had him in my mock draft going into the Bears in the 3rd round, and only because of the injuries. He lost basically 2 seasons at Miami because of injuries. But he's a talented kid. He went down to the Senior Bowl and he was unguardable. So I think even if Terrence Ferguson, he's not the down the seam big time play pass catching type that the first 4 are, but Ferguson gives you some big plays as well. Another 6'6", 6'7" kid, solid in terms of making the catch. It is tough to tackle after the catch as well. Gives you some of that yak up opportunity. Fedone, again, a young guy, very little used there at Nebraska. I think only had 24 receptions last year, but again, 6'5", down at the Senior Bowl, ran really good crisp routes, was tough at the catch point with a defensive back draped all over him, shows good natural hands to pluck it out of the air. So, Fanine is a guy had a tremendous year out of Bowling Green. He's just a true H-back, and he's a guy that's not going to be lined up in line, and that's the guy that you could use in different ways. he's lower here on the list mainly because of just the bend and his lower half is not as athletic as some of the other guys that are on this list here too. But Mitchell Evans, another one, big guy from Notre Dame, guy who can line up as inline tight end. Another one that injuries have really hurt his time there at Notre Dame. And Jackson Haas is one of my guy Aldo's day 3 gems. He's a guy that is known more for as an inline blocker. Was a Yale a player, transferred to Georgia Tech last year. But as we saw, we talked about him. I think it was last episode on Draft on Tap. Although I feel like he's got more to offer if utilized correctly in the passing game. And of course, I just talked about Joshua Simon.
Outstanding. Okay, so let us now move to the running backs. Here's Danny's top 10 list for running backs.
Or did running backs. We just did it before this.
Let me change that to wide receivers.
There we go.
Outstanding list of top 10 wide receivers. Travis Hunter at the top. The kid from Ohio State is second. I've been hearing so many great things about Emeka Egbuka, but I got to be honest with you, I just haven't done any of the work on him. Tell me why he is so highly regarded.
Well, typical Ohio State receiver, right? Tough, physical. He's not a speed burner. He ran a 4.46 40 at the combine. Former baseball player. He's a 5-star high school recruit coming out of high school, but he's a 3-year starter, team captain. He's a leader on this offense at Ohio State. And he's a guy that can run really good, crisp routes. And he's a guy that can line up in the slot. And that's where I was looking for. I was looking for guys that could be a complement, obviously, to DJ and Roma Dunze, guys that can line up predominantly in the slot, not necessarily just stay in the slot, but that would be a majority of where they would see their snaps. And obviously, guys in the slot got to be tough, got to be willing to block. Got to have to go out there and be able to be productive, on Sundays. And I thought about Travis Hunter, like obviously the Bears. I want to be realistic with my top 10 list. Bears are not going to have a chance to get Travis Hunter, so I thought about maybe moving him off there and adding someone else. But I already sent the list in, and I don't want to make Aldo do double the work, so I left him on there. But yeah, going down the list there, Matthew Golden is a 5'10", 5'11", former Houston Cougar receiver, transferred to Texas last year, blazed that 4.39 40 at the combine. And he's a guy that brings you some of that speed element out of the slot. Ted McMillan is a big bodied guy that's he might not be available, or he might be, but he's a first round type of guy. I don't see the Bears getting him unless they go a first round receiver and shock all of us. But he's a more of like a big, thick, think of a Drake London type, a big physical receiver, a guy that can go up and get it, big catch radius. He's a guy that's been kind of knocked for some of his things that he said in the pre-draft process in terms of his interview. So, Luther Burden is a guy that we talked about with our guest last week. And now I'm drawing a blank is my favorite guy.
JP Acosta.
No. I'm sorry. 2 weeks ago from NFL Network, Eric.
Eric Edholm.
Eric at home is a Mizzou grad, and he knows a lot about the Missouri players. And Luther Burden is a guy that, to me, coming into the season, was one of the top prospects at the receiver position. And I think kind of took a step back this year. Watching the tape at Missouri, I just felt like Brady Cook, who's their quarterback there, who's also in this draft. I don't think he was really utilizing a Burden in a way that maximized his value. There was a lot of quick hitters, and I think just they limited his route tree as well. But the routes he did run, I thought I did a good job there. But he's a guy that just get the ball in his hands and let him do his thing, right? And I think he could utilize him out of the slot there as well. Jalen Noel is a kid that I've been talking about since the Senior Bowl. This kid out of Iowa State, tough. Again, it brings you, again, that speed element, 4.3 guy in terms of speed, tough, punt returner, kick returner. Another guy that they use multiple different ways at Iowa State, whether it's in the backfield, they bring him in jet sweeps, toss the ball to him. There's the guy, another one, just to get the ball to him in space. Jane Higgins is his teammate, more of that bigger body receiver. I try to stay away from those big body guys, but obviously you see with McMillan and with Hayden Higgins, I just couldn't deny their talents, right? And again, you could still utilize big guys, in the slot as well. And with DJ Moore, he hasn't done a lot in terms of working from the slot, but I could see him maybe kicking inside if you bring a guy like Higgins that can kind of match up on the outside. So, but I think all these guys give you the versatility of being able to line up on the outside or inside in the slot. Trey Harris is a guy that I really, the more I watched him, the more I liked him from Ole Miss. Another natural hands catcher, good route runner, silky smooth receiver type. Torrey Horton, another one of guys at Colorado State goes unnoticed, really. Big guy, 6'2.5", 196, 4'4", 140. He's a guy that's got some of that make you miss ability, has punt return ability. He's got 3 punt return touchdowns. So he's a bigger body player, but he's got some of that sizzle, some of that twitch in him that he can make guys miss, stop and go ability. I think he would provide some big time elements, not only on offense, but also on special teams there as well. And then Kyle Williams. Kyle Williams is a kid from Washington State. More of that typical kind of undersized, 5'11", 190 type of receiver. But he's tough and he's quick. Ran a 4.40. Played his first 3 seasons at UNLV, but he started the last 2 years at Washington State. And he's the guy that lined up on the outside. At Washington State, also lined up on the inside. I just see him being utilized in a way in this offense out of the slot where I think could be very, very productive. And I think, again, another one of these groups where there's a lot of depth there. And I just trying to pick 10 guys that I could envision Ben Johnson and Declan Doyle, the offensive corner, kind of utilizing here. And then, giving these guys to an Antoine Randall to coach up and make them better in terms of route running or in terms of blocking and whatnot. I think these guys just kind of fit that mold there in that particular order.
Danny Antonio is asking if Higgins is available at 39. That's the first of the 2 second-round draft picks. Do you take him?
Antonio, I think that's where Higgins is going to go. I think that's his range, or early to mid second round. I just at this point right now, I would not take him only because I think there's a lot of question marks on the offensive line, on the defensive line, and that's where I'm at. I'm at the trenches. Once you've secured the trenches, then you can move on to there. So whether you can get a receiver later on in the draft, maybe 3rd, 4th round, is probably where the range I would look at. But Higgins, that's going to be his sweet spot, right? That second round, top of the second round right now, it's earmarked for quarterbacks, running backs, and receivers, right? Maybe a couple tight ends here and there, but that's where you're going to see. So if you need a defensive line or safety or whatnot, if you have one of those top picks, and some of these teams now want to come and get some of these skill position players, and if you're the Bears, this is where you can make some hay in terms of collecting some draft capital to move down. Remember, you don't have a 4th round pick. Maybe you can recoup that if you move down. So that's an area where, depending on who's available there, and depending on obviously what they do in the 1st round, I think that's where they can make a hay by moving back, but also fortifying a position either on the offensive or defensive lines there as well.
I'll ask the same question that Cliff asked about the previous position we looked at. Is there anyone on this list that you would say, Torrey Hunter or Kyle Williams? Absolutely not. You're good with all 10 of these guys.
Good with all 10 guys. Again, obviously, I don't want a receiver in the 1st round, right? And a lot of these guys are 1st round guys. So, but having said that, if you trade down, right? If you trade down, whether it's once or twice, and you get in the 20s, and you get to a position where, like say a Buka is sitting there looking at you straight in the face, I mean, that's great value for that position right there. Assuming there's no offense or defensive lineman that's going to be there, that's going to have a higher grade than a Buka. So and that's such a situation. That's where I would consider it, because I would go on my board, position of need, not as high a position need as some other ones, but again, we've said it multiple times, you cannot really ignore your board just to fill a position of need. So if a Buka's in there, if you've traded down, you're in the 20s now, he's kind of glaring there on your board. It's a position of need. It's not the highest, but you go get a kid like that.
Dr. Truth says, I'm a big fan of Jack Beck. He's not lying when he says that. Jack Beck is good. He's great for a big slot wide receiver with great hands, great blocker, and most importantly, great at yards after the catch, which will make Ben Johnson happy with EPA, which he values very much. What do you think about Jack Beck, and why isn't he on your top 10?
Yeah, Jack Beck is a guy I looked at. Obviously, a former LSU Tiger. Went to TCU. And had the great Senior Bowl week. Obviously, we know the tragedy, unfortunately, with his brother in terms of what happened on New Year's Eve. But for me, these guys are more dynamic than Jack Beck. He's more of that rugged type of get down the field and make that kind of play receiver, but not as dynamic as some of these guys are here. So for me, these guys are just better in terms of overall athletic ability, give you better in terms of speed. Some are better in terms of catch radius. Some are better in terms of going up and making a play on a contested ball. It's done in different ways, but in terms of being tough, yeah, Jack Beck is tough. Will he, work in the slot and be able to cover, block and all that stuff? Yeah, he can, but I can only pick 10. And for me, some of the dynamic elements that these receivers gave me was better, in my opinion, than what Beck would give you.
Got another question here. It is, let me grab it real quickly. Donald Gooch is asking, what if Luther Burden is there at number 39? Talking about
that would be tempting as well, Donald. It really would be tempting there as well. At a dynamic player in that position. But I just like we talked about with Higgins, right? What have you done, right? In terms of offense and defensive lines, those are, to me, bigger needs. And, if you go now saying, all right, you took an offensive lineman, say, for the first pick, and now you're looking at maybe an edge guy, maybe a defensive tackle, maybe, even a linebacker or a safety, whatever. If Luther Burden is out there and he's higher on your board, some of the other ones, and the other ones are kind of like more in that same range, this is where I would say, all right, I'd open up my phone lines. All right, who wants to come grab a dynamic receiver like Luther Burden? Because again, while receiver is a need, it's not a huge need, right? It's not a position where, like these guys, I don't see any of these guys coming in and taking over the starting spots from either Rome or DJ Moore. And we talked about with Ben Johnson, he's going to utilize a lot of more 12-man personnel, more two tight end sets. I'm not saying he's going to eliminate the third or fourth receiver, but he's probably going to rely a lot more on tight ends early on. So yes, I would love to see Luther Burden in the Bears uniform, but at 39, that is a high pick. That is a value pick. And it depends on what I've done with the trenches there in terms of offensive, defensive line. Defensive tackle is still a big need for me on this team. Edge is still a need for me, right? But more so tackle. I think defense tackle is a big need. Left side player, guard or left side tackle is another big need for this team as well. So it'll be tempting. It'll be tempting as heck to take Luther Burden there, number 39. But I kind of just go back and see what's available, what I've done so far, and what we have going on here with my board.
All right, Chubbs with the $10 donation. He writes, Travis Hunter is overrated just because he played both ways. But the truth is, he wasn't the best at either. I see concussions and broken clavicles with his 12-year-old body. When you say 12-year-old body, are you saying that's how many years he's played, Chubbs?
I think he's saying that he looks like he's underdeveloped, like a 12-year-old.
Oh, gotcha. That makes sense.
I mean, that's the one risk you take with a kid like Hunter is he's 186 pounds and 6 feet, 186 pounds is what he measured in at. But in terms of, for me at least, I think he's a better receiver than I would use him as a receiver than corner. Now, some might say you probably get more longevity out of him as a corner than a receiver because the receiver is taking all the hits and all that stuff as opposed to corner where he's, we've seen corners that are great cover corners, but don't really tackle that well. But I think a Hunter for me, this guy had over 1,000 yards, receiving. I forgot, was it 15 or 12 touchdown receiving? He won the Blitnikoff Award for the best receiver in college football last year. So, he's got some special types of hands, guys. And again, he's not the developed route runner. He's still got to work on that as well. So that's why, I do think it's going to be hard to play in both ways, especially what he's saying. He wants to play full time both ways. And I think that's going to be practically impossible. I think what you do, you bring him in to whatever the organization. If it was me, I'd bring him as a receiver and I'd let him dabble as defensive back. Because just think about all the meetings and all the time and preparation and Sean McDermott, I believe I saw him quoted saying, it's the physical pounding. And I think Chubbs, you might be referring to this here as well as the physical pounding of being able to play both offense and defense. that takes a toll on you. I know you played college football there that way, but this is a different animal here at the NFL. And so I think for me, I would bring him in, whatever I see him. I see him as better as a receiver. Put him in there and let him dabble a defensive back. But and that's how I would then watch his, in terms of his weight, watch his, his snaps and try and, make him a more productive receiver than I would worry about doing, both ways.
Travis Hunter, in my mind, well, what position would you have him play the most snaps or concentrate the most? Receiver. Because here's the thought that was presented today on NFL Network is the defensive coordinator is going to say, well, if you want him to play some defense, he's got to be at my meeting. Well, we're doing the install now or something like that. It's at the NFL level. It is much more different for a player to get up to speed. So I'm guessing that whatever two-way split he's going to be, it's going to be like 90-10. Does that make sense?
Impossible. You're right. It's impossible because if think about it, if you're a defensive back and you want to play receiver, I mean, we're talking. How many times you talked about quarterbacks getting in rhythm with the receivers, right? Running out there, running routes, and learning the intricacies in terms of being able when to cut and learning each other. And so I think if you concentrate on receiver, get that done first. And now second, third season, now you can, while you're a veteran, now you can dabble a little bit, maybe in the offseason into your team's defensive secondary meetings and kind of pick up some of that stuff. Or now you could be brought in maybe as a slot corner or as a nickel corner or whatnot, and now you can place them both ways. But for me, looking at him, I know it's mixed throughout the league. I mean, some teams will say, like I believe it was the Titans said that they see him as a prime time corner, and with a little bit of receiver. The Browns flipped around, said they see him as a receiver with a little bit of a corner. And I'm more on the Browns side there and seeing him more as a primary receiver, adding some of that big play element on the offense. And then dabbling there, maybe year two or whatnot, as a nickel back or a corner.
Very good. Chubbs goes on to say the awards are a popularity contest. I'm not taking an undersized slot receiver in the top 5. God help the team that does. Well, he is going to go probably in the top second or third pick. Yeah. Here is, by the way, I got some video here that I'd like to share with you, Danny. This is Teteroya McMillan. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know if there was any sound. I couldn't hear any sound on that end, so I'm not sure if you were playing any sound or not. But yeah, I mean, in terms of it looked like you were playing McMillan versus Travis Hunter. Yeah, yes. I mean, in terms of McMillan, I mean, his again, Drake London is the comp you get a lot with him. He's a guy that's not going to really create a lot of separation with his route running and speed and all that. He's not that shifty and quick, but he's more of that big catch radius guy. The guy who can go up and get it. And we saw there a couple of times, he towered over, a guy like Hunter and be able to, with his long arms, bring the catch. And, that shot he saw in the end zone with that one-handed, touchdown grab there as well. And that's those special things that he brings. And these are, those are the type of receivers that remember back in days, the Calvin Johnson types, the Charles Johnson types, the guys that were the big guys, the Rodgers guy, remember back-to-back years, Mike Williams and Rodgers went 2 overall to the Detroit Lions. Don't mean to bring up bad memories there, Don Burr. Sorry about that. But I mean, those are the big type of receivers that their NFL teams coveted. And now, they want the quicker, shiftier guys with long speed and guys that can go up and make a play with vertical ability and guys that can create separation with route running. But yeah, and McMillan's more of that old school type of receiver, throwback type, if you will. The guy that can just throw the ball up to him and he can go up and get it, right, with his catch radius and his size and his frame and his length. So that's the kind of receiver that McMillan is.
All right. Let us move on to the offensive line. These are Danny's top 10 offensive linemen. Miles Frazier. He first came to my attention when you talked about him on one of our earlier episodes of Draft on Tap this season. He's somebody we should be keeping an eye on. Can he play any tackle? Or is he just an interior offensive lineman?
Well, he's played 5 positions. He's played 4 positions. He's played right guard, left guard, and right tackle. He's got 2 starts in his career on right tackles, and he's got the measurements. At 6'5", 324, he's got 33 and 3/8-inch arm length. So if you need to, in a pinch, play him at right tackle, I can see him doing that all day. But he's predominantly most of his starts are at right guard, so he's got that right-handed stance, already down if you want to kick him out. But yeah, I mean, I love this kid. Talk about watching him play at the Senior Bowl. It just gives you some of that versatility, gives you some of that athletic ability and a big body. Again, 324, 6'5", moves well for a bigger guy. Can displace defensive linemen at the line of scrimmage. Has athletic ability to get up and pull and lead. If you can run some power gap stuff, can move vertically or horizontally and with lateral agility to be able to maintain contact with his defender if you're doing zone stuff. So I think he fits that scheme where you can do both. And again, just a guy that I think got lost in the shuffle, obviously with the big name guys on LSU in terms of Will Campbell and even Emory Jones on the opposite side there as well. But I think Miles Frazier is a guy that is going to be a very, very damn good offensive lineman, and you might be able to get him in a 3rd, maybe even a 4th round. Depends on how far it goes. But I think he's a guy that can come in, gives you some good depth initially, and then also eventually, in my opinion, could be a starter on the offensive line.
Tell me why Kelvin Banks is 7th when I've seen him be a top 10 draft pick in some mocks by media people.
I'm not high on Kelvin Banks, and I wasn't high on Kelvin Banks with the start of this process. The more I dug into his tape, the more I saw a guy that to me was struggle versus speed, struggled on the outside at tackle versus guys that are quicker, faster than him. And my scouting report on Shiman Draft Scout, I comped him to a guard. I mean, that's where I projected him as his best position at the next level, possibly left guard. So and I know he was a highly touted, highly rated tackle coming into his, but 6'4", 33-inch arms. For me, again, just a lot of waist bending. Someone to me, sometimes I don't want to call him lazy, but looks lazy at times on his pass rush. It doesn't have the nastiness that I like to see in my offensive linemen. And I know I've said this comment before, like his tape was soft, not meaning that he's a soft player, just, again, just going back to the nastiness and just being someone that finishes tackles or finishes blocks on a consistent basis. For me, and I just see it. You put him on a left tackle. I think you're asking for trouble in the long run. So if you want to bring him in, and you want to try him on left tackle, you can do that. But I just don't see him succeeding there at left tackle. And this is one of the drafts, and a lot of these prospects, the tackle prospects. A lot of them, even me initially going through it, I'm like, man, I just don't know if they can play tackle. And so there's very rare tackle prospects that you can just project as starting tackles at the next level, right? And talking to some other people as well, like they also see a lot of these guys maybe kicking inside the guard. Membu is another guy, right tackle, maybe right guard. Obviously, we've talked about Campbell. The only reason Campbell was talking about being a left guard is because of his arm length, but he's a left tackle in terms of everything else. But Josh Shimon's, the kid from Ohio State, for me is a true left tackle. I could say left tackle or right tackle. He's got experience on both sides. He, unfortunately, was coming off a torn patella tendon. And there's no timetable in terms of, at least I don't know when he's going to be available to play. So I think that's going to drop his stock a little bit. But I mean, there's very rare. Josh Connolly Jr., the kid from Oregon, I love him as well. He's a guy that can play maybe left tackle, but I know can play left guard in the NFL. So a lot of players on this list that can give you some flexibility between guard and tackle. But yeah, going back to I've never been high on Kelvin Banks Jr. coming into the process, watching his tape, I'm still not high on him. And some people are saying that, he's a top 10 pick, but for me, I've just never been high on him. You're on mute, my friend.
I did it again. Antonio is asking, Danny, do you take age into consideration when you're doing these rankings? Banks is only 21, very young still. Most of these guys are very young, aren't they, Danny?
Yeah, and I do, Antonio. I honestly do. And age is something you could take into effect where, they're still young, they're still developing, they're get them into a coaching, NFL coaching, and then, and get them in a weight room and coach them up. But, there are certain things that I look for on tape, right? And that's, nastiness, finishing, playing the whistle, being able to handle, speed rushers on the outside. And, these are just things. Again, there are some things that I saw on his tape. They're just, I don't want to call him lazy, but I characterize when I jot down my notes as a lazy effort, right? And or a lazy rep, because I just don't see him going full out. And is that part of his age? Again, he's playing in a Power 5 conference. Playing for Texas, a team that was highly ranked all year. I shouldn't see that on his tape, especially if you're coming into the season as one of the top rated tackles in the entire college football landscape. So those are things that for me, I kind of are a little bit of red flags, if you will. But again, I just him handling speed is very, very high. His inability to handle speed is very high in terms of my alert status, right? I'm really concerned about that part, putting him at tackle. Kick him inside the guard, could be a fine guard for you for years to come. Now, I know teams are going to draft him as a tackle. So, I know I'm in the minority in this. So, and I'm, I could be right and I could be wrong as well, but I just have this feeling that he's a guy that's going to be better, kicked inside a guard where he's got some protection. He does a better job of going up against bigger guys, more, coming straight at him as opposed to guys that are more twitchier, have more speed and go around. Just put on the Georgia game, right? Jalen Walker and McMichael Williams, just both games. I mean, they just took him, took his lunch every time out there. So that's why I'm not as high on Kelvin Banks as some of the other guys.
J2K is wondering how many people would be upset if the Bears took Josh Connerly at 10. Don't be surprised.
A lot of people will be upset, J2K. Not that I would be upset, because I think he's a guy that fills that. Now, is it too rich at number 10 for Josh Connerly? It depends. I would say yes, but if you would trade down to say 15 or 17, I'd have no problem taking Josh Connerly there. But then you would say, all right, well, if in a draft where everyone's board's going to be all over the place, right? There's we heard Ian Cunningham say earlier, there's some blue chip guys, but the quantity isn't a lot there. So a lot of guys are going to have a bunch of players ranked kind of in that big jumble in the middle, and so I think people will be upset with Josh Connerly Jr. being taken 10th, but I think he has a chance to be a better pro, and he's a guy that I can see being a guard, but also I would not give up on him playing left tackle, right? Because I see some of that stuff that I didn't see with Kelvin Banks Jr. I see some of the nastiness, I see some of the finish, I see some of the athletic ability, shine on his tape. A former 5-star recruit. So I think Connerly Jr. would raise eyebrows, but I think in the long run he'd probably be a better pick than say a Kelvin Banks Jr. at number 10.
Danny, a couple of questions have come in about Ursay. You're not a fan?
It's not that I'm not a fan. He's a big dude. He's a big guy. I was looking at his notes here earlier. He's a, let me say, I think I might have him right here, but 6'5", 6'6", here was 6'6", 339, 331 at the combine, 33 1/8 arm length. Played, football in his junior year of high school. So he's a guy that's kind of developing. So took football at a later time. 3-year starter at a left tackle for Minnesota. Heavy mover. All right. For my tackles, I want to see guys that are, more of a, easy mover, bigger guys that are athletic. But he's a big hulking kind of guy. And there's clips where, he does a good job in terms of getting back to his set spot, being able to stop that pass rush. And there's times where he just gets beaten. And again, another one that, tends to kind of lunge and bend at the waist. And you always heard this term in scouting is you don't want any waist benders at tackle. So, maybe he can flip around and play right tackle eventually, or maybe you get him into a program where, mean, I do feel like he needs to maybe drop some weight there. I mean, he's at 339 right now, so maybe got 325 or something like that. Maybe a little bit lighter could help him there as well. But definitely a guy that's worth looking at. But he's more for me like a third round range type of tackle. These guys here, all those guys here I've listed are all first and second round guys basically.
All right, let us move in now to the Danny's top 10 safeties. Is Penn State a factory for safeties?
Looks like either that or pass rushers, with and linebackers. But
who do you want to highlight?
It's safeties is a position I've said it's kind of snuck up as being a bigger need that I anticipated coming into this offseason, right? And a lot of it stems with what we discussed before with the injury to Jaquan Brisker, right? And I know everyone says that he's good and hopefully he is good, but the depth behind Brisker and the starter Kevin Byard, who's this veteran who had a pretty good season last year, but he's in the last year of his contract. Depth back there is kind of light, right? You got a couple young players there, but I just do feel like this is a draft where now you got a new defensive coordinator in there, wants a different kind of safety, meaning that he wants guys that are a little bit more interchangeable. He doesn't want a guy that's strictly more, a box guy or a guy that's a coverage guy. He wants guys that both safeties that can play. Maybe even want a nickel safety there as well, because he utilized Tyrann Mathieu there a lot in New Orleans. So, so I went in here looking for guys that could be interchangeable, meaning that they could, whether it's a run play or a pass play, that I'm not going to be afraid that they can't make the play or a tackle or whatnot. So my top guys is Malachi Starks. This is the kid from Georgia. The guy looks like a cornerback, like a big cornerback, and he's the guy that can come down and he can cover out of the slot in terms of the tight end or slot receiver. He's a guy that can drop back. He's got tremendous body control, really good hands. Put on that Clemson tape, makes a sensational interception versus Clemson. So I think for me, Starks is my top safety there. And again, interchangeable guy that can play the ball. Drop back and a leader as well. He's a guy that was one of the veterans there in that Georgia secondary, right? 3-year starter, never missed a start. 5-star recruit, highly recruited, consensus All-American. Again, a guy that really does a good job of making play. Had 6 interceptions for his career, so he's got some ball skills there as well. So again, he can come down and make a play in terms of as a run defender. He's also a guy that can drop back and cover that back half, and you feel pretty good about him back there. So that's why Starks took the main spot there for me. Nick Emawori is the big workout guy from SC, South Carolina. SC 6'3", 220. Big dude, 32.5-inch arm length. He was a talk to combine, ran an amazing 4.38 40, the 1.49 10-yard split, a 43-inch vertical, 11-foot 6-inch broad jump. I mean, these are Aldo Gandia type numbers this guy put up at the combine, and again, another 3-year starter, a freshman All-American when he first came in, and the guy that also makes the plays on the ball, right? He had 6 interceptions, 4 last year. He's got 11 passes broken up. He does have 2 interception return for touchdowns. So again, a guy that can pick it off and run it back with that 4.38 speed. and so again, that I feel like could be a guy that could be interchangeable. Where if he's up at the box or if he's back in coverage, I think you'd be comfortable there with him as well. Obviously, I think both these top two guys are going to go in the first round, so I honestly don't think these are realistic expectations for as the Bears getting these guys. But if they were to trade down or whatnot and accumulate more picks, we'll know what happens. But again, just quietly a position that I've thought about more and more as the offseason went along here. And then just kind of moving on to my list here, Xavier Watts. He's a guy that I think, although you like him a lot as well,
very much.
Another bigger body guy, 6 feet, 204 pounds. This is a ball hawking safety. This is a guy that makes has tremendous range on the ball. I think it was ahead. I think it was 7 interceptions last year. I have his numbers here right in front of me. Let's see. 13 interceptions the last 2 seasons, 7 the year before, 6 this past season. Just a guy that's a ball hawking safety to come in and make a play. Former receiver who catches the ball like a receiver, plays the jump ball in the backfield there like a receiver as well. His tackling could get a little bit more in terms of a sounder, if you will. There's a couple times where he comes in a little bit too high on the receiver and the guy just breaks away from him. That's more of a coaching thing. I think that can be corrected. It's not something I'm worried about, but definitely a guy that is active in here around the line of scrimmage. But again, that ball hawking ability is what you like, and I think that's what defensive coordinators will want to see from their free safety back there. So the next guy on my list is a guy I've been talking about for the last couple of weeks. I'm sorry, Aldo, did you want to have a question or should I keep going?
No, please go ahead. I thought you were done, but let me interject this question because he's coming up on your list. Kevin Winston, Danny, many have him as a first round talent. Why do you have him at 6th on your list?
Yeah, 6, and it's mainly because of the injuries. He's a guy that he's a talented kid. Hasn't been able to stay healthy, unfortunately. I have his notes right here in front of me. Give me a second. I'll pull them up real quick.
Sorry to get you out of order there.
Yeah, no worries. He's coming off an ACL injury. A thin frame. That's one of the concerns with him is he's an active, athletic kid, fearless, near the line of scrimmage. But another guy that just aims high. Gets sucked up by ball fakes as well. So there's some little coaching things here and there, but mainly it's the injuries. He's a guy that's missed a good chunk of time, just a 1-year full-time starter. Has only made 15 career starts at Penn State. So I think he's a talented kid. Looks great. Needs a little bit more development, but I think that the reason why he's down here is because he's coming off the ACL injury, and there's no timeline in terms of when he'll be available. Could he be available in beginning of training camp? Is it going to go into the season? I don't have access to the medical record, so at this point I don't have that information. Obviously, clubs do, right? So clubs could say, all right, no, he's clear, we're good to go. He could be ready by training camp, and then that'll probably boost him up on some teams' board. But for me here, talented kid, I like the way he plays with a really, really aggressive play style, but the injury really kind of set him back here for me, at least.
All right, Danny. Who else on your top 10 list did you want to comment?
Well, Billy Bowman is a guy that I've talked about a lot. He's a guy I think we've covered so many times here. I like him a tremendous amount here. And Andrew Mukaba is a kid that really, was a Clemson kid. Was a 4-year starter there. Transferred to Texas, and really just 5'11", 186. But he is a missile when it comes to coming down and filling the run lanes with aggression. He'll lay out people. Had 5 interceptions, so he showed some more ball skills there as well. Maybe potentially being more of like a ball hawk type of safety. But again, some have said that he might be a nickel kind of safety. We'll see how it goes. But that 186 really kind of worries some people in terms of his size, how he can hold up as a full-time safety in the NFL. So those are some concerns. But man, his tape at Texas was sensational last year. So again, 5 interceptions, led the SEC. So I think that's a heck of a pickup there. And we talked about Winston. Sanker is a guy, really, the kid from Virginia. I put on his tape, and number 20, it kind of reminds me some of a little of what Brisker is. But I think this guy's more of a better cover safety than Brisker is right now. But again, another one, 6 feet, 206, 32.25 inch arm length. Got that long reach there. 4.48 40, 1.5 110-yard split. This is a guy that was a 3-star high school recruit, but he played quarterback, running back, and safety. So it tells you what kind of athlete he was coming out of high school. 3-year starter at Virginia, a 2-time first-team All-ACC. again, big physical guy, quick feet, a guy that can, drop back and in terms of his transitions, comes out of his back pedal quickly, comes downhill with aggression, can cover tight ends, can drop out in the flats and cover receivers there in the slot. The big knock about him is interceptions. Only has 2 interceptions for his career. So his ball hawking skills aren't up to par to some of the other ones we've already talked about. But yeah, definitely a guy that gives you that big physical kind of safety back there in the form of a Jaquan Brisker.
Mm-hmm. Getting a lot of compliments in the chat. Mr. Shorty says Danny lives for this.
Thank you, Mr. Shorty. Appreciate it.
True passion, and on and on. And J2K says, Danny really puts in the work when he's got Billy Bowman in at number 4 because he loves that pick at number 4. So good.
And the underrated guy is Dante Trader Jr. Don't fall asleep on that kid as well from Maryland. That's the one I can touch on real quick. Another one of these athletic safeties, right? He's about 5'11", 196. Had a 33-inch vertical, ran a 4.65 40, 1.58 10-yard split. But he's a guy that was a member of the Maryland national lacrosse team. So he's a dual sport athlete. Comes over, a 3-year starter for Maryland. Again, just a guy that reads real quick, has the athletic twitch in him to be able to come downhill, make plays on the football. Has 5 interceptions for his career, 15 passes defensed. So this is the guy that again, interchangeable. I think he probably is a better free safety if I had to pin him in a position, but definitely a guy that does not shy away from contact at or near the line of scrimmage. And again, 5'11", 196 gives you some of that, a little bit of the size, not as big as some of the other guys, but definitely a guy that for me is a sleeper, possibly even a day 3 guy, but a guy that really I think would a lot of Chicago fans would love. Talk about physicality. Is Lathan Ransom. That guy will knock your socks off. He's more of that old school talk about, being that, strong, in-box safety. But the word I've been using though is interchangeable, right? And while, he might be more of that cover 2 type of cover half the field type of safety, not a guy that really will kind of highlight single high kind of formations, but his speed isn't the greatest. I think he ran a 4.59 if I'm not mistaken, 40. But he brings you physicality. He brings you some of that intimidating presence. Receivers and tight ends are going to think twice before crossing the middle of the field with Lathan Ransom back there.
Hey, you got a question here. Danny, would Aldo be better a free safety or strong safety in the NFL?
Aldo's more of that box type of old school safety. He's that kind of, he'll wear like that fencing neck roll, that collar and just the big bulky shoulder pads and then we'll make a tackle, we'll get up and just like get into people's faces and then 2 plays later he's got a pulled hamstring.
Danny nailed it to the T. Danny nailed it to the T. I want to hit somebody. I'm going to be close to the line. And yeah, I'm going to get hurt really, really quick. All right. I wanted to ask you about Sebastian Castro. He's not on your list. When I look at his tape, I see a guy who is undersized, doesn't have all the tools, but he does make big play after big play. So what do you think about Sebastian Castro?
Yeah, he's a guy I studied there as well. 3-year starter for Iowa. Played that it's a hybrid position. I think they call it the Leo position, if I'm not mistaken, there at Iowa, where it's like half linebacker, half safety. For me, his coverage is not up to par with some of the other guys here that I've listed in terms of being able to drop back. 5'11", 203. Fearless in terms of coming down and being a guy that plays with physicality. Could be a nickel type of safety, maybe a guy you can bring in there on certain sub situations. But I think he'll be in the league. He'll be a guy that plays on special teams and makes a living there. But again, he's a guy that to me was more of that hybrid type. Doesn't really fit the traditional type of safety, at least in my opinion, in terms of his coverage ability. But definitely, guys more comfortable at or near the line of scrimmage. But I think just in talking about someone that's going to be interchangeable, be able to, be drop back in coverage. I think that's where Castro limits are in terms of, that's where his downfall is in terms of being able to be a good back half of the secondaries kind of safety valve back there. So I think that's where, for me, Castro doesn't fit in with these top 10 guys.
The other guy I wanted to ask you about is the safety out of Wisconsin, Hunter Wohler. Now, I like him. He is another guy who just seems to make big plays. The only thing I don't like about him is that he's a big Packers fan. But what do you think about Hunter Wohler?
Yeah, big kid, 6'2", 213, definitely sticks out. Another one of these guys where like some have said, could he be a linebacker? Could we just add him maybe another 10 or 11 pounds to him and make him a linebacker? But 4.57, really athletic, 1.54, 10 yard split, 37-inch vertical. This guy is a pretty good damn athlete. Excellent size, good straight line athlete. Will get down active at the line of scrimmage. Looks like an extra linebacker in my opinion. Could make teams, in my opinion, as a special team standout. Has returned 8 punts in his career, so it could give you some value there as well. But again, quick change of directions. There are some lower body stiffness with him, right? And so we're talking about a guy that's back in coverage. He's going to be able to, if he's been a single high formation, for example, he's going to have to be able to quickly change and transition, open his hips, and run from the sideline to sideline. I think that's where he struggles. It lacks the range and foot speed to be an NFL safety, in my opinion. Some teams have discussed, again, adding him bulk to him and make him a linebacker. So those are just some of my notes that I added here on his report. But yeah, just a guy that's, I can see him making a team again as a special teamer, but just not someone that has the change of direction, the range to be a back half kind of a safety and coverage.
All right, so there were 6 position groups that Danny has put together top 10 list. Let's go to the final one, and that is defensive linemen. And the video I did for this one, I put in some dogs barking because these are some junkyard dogs. Oh, I love that music. But there it is. Danny's top 10 defensive linemen. Danny, the more and more I think about the potential that if the Bears stay at 10 and they select McMichael Williams, the more and more I'm getting excited about that. It is underappreciated, I think, by most Bears fans because I don't hear his name mentioned. But what this guy could do in Dennis Allen's defense, in my opinion, could wreak havoc, and he could be a mainstay for the next 10 years. Your thoughts?
Aldo, I love this kid, and I love him in terms of, as again, we're going into this top 10 list and looking for the Bears. I know Dennis Allen likes what? He likes physical guys with length. If you're edge guys, you got to be able to play the run. You can't just be just an Ole pass rusher and be Ole in terms of run defense. So that's one of the bigger things. I'm looking for length, looking for guys that can bring some pass rush ability, looking for guys that'll play the run. And McMichael Williams for me fits all of it. And I've talked about in terms of this guy is a kid that really came into the season in terms of one of the higher prospects. Got hurt in that first game against Clemson and really just kind of wasn't the same. Ended up with only 5 sacks in the season. And I think 4 of them came against Texas, if I'm not mistaken. So we talked earlier about what happened with Kellen Banks Jr., but it's kind of a weird stat. But 5 of his 4 sacks came against Texas. But the only thing is he's athletic. He's got the length. He's got a first step quickness. He's a guy that you can see Kirby Smart utilizing where he can drop back into coverage, has got some of that range to be able to, even to cover in the flats. Gives you, again, just an athletic edge guy with an ability to be able to play the run, set a hard edge, funnel everything back to his defensive line mates. But for me, he's my top, true edge player, defensive end guy. So, the latest rumblings, and I don't want to break your heart here, Aldo, the night before the draft, but the latest rumblings is he's going number 9 to the Saints. So we'll see if that even there for the Bears to pick up. But again, and I think if I'm not mistaken, he's only 21 years old. So he's still a young kid where his best football is still, ahead of him. You get him in there, he already shows you some of the elite traits that he has in terms of, again, short area bursts, first step quickness, length. He's got some of the, in terms of arsenal repertoire with his hand usage, swim, rip, so on and so forth. Now you just get him into a defensive line coach and kind of make him better. Got to get a little bit bulkier, got to get a little more stronger. But again, just a young guy, just his best football is ahead of him. I think any team is going to get him, whether it's the Bears or Saints or whoever. I think you're looking at a guy that potentially could be an impact NFL pass rusher.
A number of people are wondering why Abdul Carter is not in your top 10 defensive line list.
So this is where Abdul Carter for me was a guy that obviously I don't think the Bears have. And that's why I kind of wanted to take Travis Hunter off of that receiver list, because if I didn't put Abdul Carter in there because the Bears have no shot at him, that's why I didn't put him in there. Not because I don't think he's a great talent. Now he doesn't fit the ideal length, size, measurables that you talk about with Dennis Allen. But again, you're talking about a special kind of breed here, special kind of athlete with that type of bend, that type of physicality at the point of attack. I don't care if he's only 6'3", 200, whatever, 49, 50, 45 pounds. He's a guy that has strength in his hands, can rock back, offensive lineman. So yeah, Abdul Carter, if it was a reality for the Bears, or if they had a shot, he'd be top of the list here. But again, not a true edge guy. So that's something that we've talked about before with Jalen Walker. He's a guy that I like him a lot, but he's a guy that's more in that as an edge player, right? But he's more in that off-ball linebacker kind of body type. So some teams see Walker as an edge guy, some see him as a linebacker, as a part-time edge guy. So it's a lot of kind of back and forth here. But yes, if Abdul Carter should be the top player here, but because I didn't think the Bears had a chance at him, that's why I didn't include him. You're on mute, my friend.
Talk to me about Derek Harmon. J2K just posted up that he's hearing Harmon has a red flag on his shoulder. Some teams will pass and others won't care. It sucks because he's his top DT. But you have him as your second player on your top 10 defensive lineman. Tell us why.
Yeah, defensive tackle is still a very big need for me. It's something I worry about for this team. I know they went and got Gray Jared, but you're talking about a veteran that's 32 years old. And Harmon is a kid at 6'4", 313, 34 and 3/8 inch arm length. So again, fits that profile of what Dennis Allen likes. Played his first 3 seasons at Michigan State, transferred to Oregon, and had his best year to date, right? 5 sacks, 4 pass defense, 11 tackles for loss. So he's a guy that's active. He's a big, active body in the middle of that defensive line. I think he could line him up as a 3 technique. I think you can line him up as a 1 technique. I think you can line him at multiple different formations. If you're playing a 30 front, you can, for a team that plays a 30 front, you could line him up as a 5 technique. So it gives you some of that position versatility. And again, a guy that's upfield, get into the gaps, get up and cause havoc in the backfield. I think Harmon, of all these defensive tackle players, I think does it on a more consistent basis for me, right? We'll get to Walter Nolan later on, but I think Nolan's more explosive in terms of dynamic getting up into the gap. But on a more consistent basis, I think I see Derek Harmon, in terms of playing the run, in terms of, again, providing some pressure, be able to, bull rush a guard back into the quarterback. Does that as well. Be able to kind of flow down line of scrimmage and be able to, do some of the backside pursuit on the running back and be able to make a tackle there as well. You see some of that there with Harmon there as well. So I think a more consistent, more overall, well-rounded, I should say, defensive tackle, and that's why he's higher on the board there than on Walter Nolan.
Outstanding. I got a question for you. There's so many players, and I'm going to be totally honest here. Greg has told me a few things about some of these players that he's asked me not to reveal because he got them from a very high source and it was confidential, but he did share them with me. And I'm not going to share those because I promised him that he wouldn't. But the headline is that there's a lot of players in this NFL draft who have red flags, who have issues, off the field with either behavior or outside forces impacting players and so forth. And so when you add it all up, the fact that there are very few premium players in this draft, the fact that there are so many guys who are red chip players, but those guys have some red flags, I wondered if this might not end up being one of the most disappointing drafts of all time. Danny, talk me off the ledge.
It depends on the red flaggers, right? I know one thing that I've heard was Walter Nolan in terms of
right,
his love of football, right? Is something that he loves doing, right? And this is where those school visits during the year that the area scout does, and this is where some of the interview process, and that's why in the top 30 visits, you kind of dig through this stuff and see what's real, what's not real, and a lot of things is a good case example right now is Shedeur Sanders. A lot of people out there are anonymous quotes, anonymous executives lambasting this kid for his attitude and all that stuff. Well, a couple years, two years ago and coming into the season, he was one of the highly rated quarterbacks and everyone was talking about. So, there's different cases, different scenarios. It depends on the player, it depends on the kid, right? It depends on and if you trust him and what he tells you, and do you trust your environment, your culture, right? Very famously, Jalen Carter was a guy that was first pick overall worthy, a couple years ago. Bears passed on him, had a chance to get him at number 9, passed on him there as well, because they just didn't feel like they could, bring him into this team or this organization and trust the kid, apparently, right? So that tells me that there are certain things that they can and cannot take for granted, and some things that they could brush under the rug or maybe even work through. So it all depends. But for me, what I'm doing is, while you hear some of these things, I can't confirm them, just like you can't confirm them either. But I rather just stick to what I'm seeing on tape, and I evaluate the player in terms of what he does. In terms of filling the needs and the size and the athletic ability and all that stuff that I look for. I always talk about grading the flash. How great of a flash player is he? Is it not consistent? Why is it not consistent? And that's where that if I was working for an NFL club, and that's one of the things I would want to find out and say, all right, I see you. I put this play on here. You're dominating this guy. 2/3 of this game, and in the fourth quarter you disappear. Are you tired? What's going on? This is where you kind of dig in and get to see more of what makes a player tick. And I think that's where some of these visits, these interviews, and again, those area scouts do yeoman's work in terms of going out to the schools and talking to everybody that knows this kid. And just, again, that's how you get all this information. And now you come together and you come to a consensus in terms of, do you believe the kid? Do you believe in terms of what he was, what he's done? Like, for example, something I don't know if this is what Greg had told you, but Texas A&M players, the defensive linemen, whether it's Scorton, whether it's Stewart and the other guy Turner, there's always talk about the way they're utilized in their scheme, right? They didn't like the way they were utilized, and if they're utilized in a better way, that they'd be more productive, and so on and so forth. So these are things you have to wade through and go and see if that's legit, that's not legit. But what I do is I look at the measurables, I look at the fit in terms of scheme, in terms of body type, athleticism, in terms of how dynamic is a player, and then I grade this. I grade the tape and I grade the production that the player has.
And I notice Mike Green is not on your top 10.
Mike Green to me is not a fit here. He's a guy that is 6'3", 250 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
Not really a great run defender. So I just doesn't 32-inch arm length is his measurable. So I think he's not a real scheme fit here for the Bears. Plus, and then talk about some character stuff. That's something that with him, he hasn't been charged with anything, but there are 2 different accusations, and this is something that was reported on ESPN. Yeah, 2 different schools, 2 different accusations in terms of harassment, sexual harassment. I believe was the category there. So 2 different schools. That's how it ends up in Marshall. Now again, the kid hasn't been charged, right? So take it for a grain of salt. And this again, I repeat what I just said earlier. You got to dig into that and see what happens. But if there's anything in that type of off the field stuff that gives you any sort of pause, you just cannot risk taking the kid, especially in the first round.
Okay, great stuff. Outstanding stuff. By the way, if you guys are wondering, all these people are just paying you so many accolades and so forth. I want to make sure that they know who you are. There he is, Danny Shiman, lead NFL draft analyst for the Barroom Network, co-host of Draft on Top Bears podcast, scouting assistant for InsideTheLeague.com, and detailed scouting reports on his own YouTube channel, Shiman Draft Scout, on YouTube, as I said. So now you know why this guy knows what he's talking about. I could have added there that you went to the Greg Gabriel scouting school, right? Tell us about that. What was that like?
Yeah, it was a class offered where Greg was the instructor, and so that's where I met Greg, and that's took a course there with him, and just really got to dig in terms of how he sees players and how he evaluates players, and then we kind of the whole class kind of asked questions back and forth. I grilled him some of the picks that they had made under his watch, and he gave me answers. He answered. He didn't backtrack or anything. He just was honest about some of the stuff, the decision they made there as a collective group there. So yeah, really got into that, and really from the friendship with Greg, and just kind of just picked up in terms of some of the stuff that he had experienced over 30 plus years of NFL scouting that, he's forgotten more things than I'll probably ever learn. So that's, and then I've done the scouting academy as well. I've taken classes there with those instructors too. So I've really delved into this. It's like, I've said earlier, this is a passion of mine. It's just something where I just love sitting there and breaking down film. And again, with the Bears bringing a new staff in and kind of learning their scheme and what they like to do. And, Dennis Allen kind of watching some Saints stuff in terms of some of the intricacies in terms of his blitzes and how he likes to pressure and utilizes safeties, for example, what kind of defensive edge guys does he like? And so trying to kind of taking all that into effect and just, going on and scouting and giving our fans here, the Barroom fans, a glimpse of terms of what I think the Bears are looking for at these positions and type of players that they're going to be looking for.
Good stuff, Danny. By the way, I wanted to play this and I forgot to when you were evaluating your offensive linemen, your top 10 list that you were revealing that to us. At the press conference, Ryan Poles was asked about the possibility, and I know you're going to cringe when you hear this.
I don't know the question.
Darnell Wright to left tackle. Let's listen to the 30-second soundbite. Ryan Poles talking about it.
As it relates to draft preparation, how do you view Darnell Wright? Do you see him exclusively on the right side, or are you open-minded to shifting him to the left if something materializes that would?
Yeah, I think that's a conversation. We'll see how everything goes. He clearly has the ability to play left and right. We saw that in college. That was part of the value in taking Darnell. So if he had to play left, I think he'd play left. And obviously, I think we're all excited about his stuff to go right.
Danny, can he play left?
All right. Well, first of all, can he play right tackle? That's the question I would like to ask, right? Because where I'm at with this. I think Darnell Wright is a better. Eventually, I think he could be a really good potential Pro Bowl right guard. But obviously, he's out at right tackle right now, and I think this is what drives me a little bit insane. Where, like people saying, "Oh, draft Armand Membu from Missouri." Well, Membu is a right side player. He's played right tackle his entire career, right? So if you're going to take him and flip him to the left side and have him learn at the NFL level, you're asking for issues. Now, the kid's athletic, he's big. There's questions about him in terms of his passion for the game as well. So that's stuff you hear there with Membu too. But I wouldn't want to take Membu and say you draft Membu and say, all right, he's going to be our right tackle. We're going to flip Darnell Wright to left tackle. Well, Darnell Wright's still learning to play right tackle, and he hasn't mastered that. It's not like he's an all-pro right tackle where you just flip him over to make him, a pretty good to damn good, left tackle. So I think that's just, now you're weakening two spots, in my opinion. Let Darnell Wright stay at right tackle. Let him learn that position. Let him get better, all right, and let him fortify that spot before we talk about switching him over. So that's why going into this process, if a guy is particularly just a right tackle, it's hard for me to put him in a list in terms of top 10 guys because I'm looking for guys that can play the left side of the offensive line. Whether they come in, they can play guard initially or left tackle, compete at left tackle, or eventually take over one of those spots as a long-term basis. But I want a left side player, and preferably I want a player that has left side, left tackle, left guard experience, right? So not saying that we haven't seen in the past where guys have played right tackle and then he flipped and vice versa to the other side. We have seen it in the past, but just to do it on the fly. I think it's something that you really, I think it's something that's not really conducive to forming a really good offensive line. So can Darnell Wright flip to the left side and play left tackle? Sure. He's done it at Tennessee. He lined up at left tackle at Tennessee. Some might even say he might be a better prospect at left tackle. I don't know, but last couple of years he's been playing right tackle, and I would hate to have him just switch over now and do that. But if they do draft Armand Membu at right tackle or as a tackle number 10 overall, I do not want to hear them talking about going up there and saying, "Oh, we're going to switch him over to the left side." I don't want to hear that from him. I want to stick him to right tackle, and then obviously, not that I'm advocating for it. I just kind of poo-pooed it right now. But if you do move Darnell Wright, I think I'd rather see him at left tackle than moving a kid like Armand Membu to left tackle.
I hear you. I'm with you on that. The one thing that I am troubled by today's era of coaching is that they want players who are versatile and can play multiple defenses. It worries me when I hear Dennis Allen talk about having Kyler Gordon learn a second position, and it could be the outside corner position, it could be the safety position, but they want him on the field more plays, and so they want him to learn another position. That might be good strategy, but what worries me is that with the collective bargaining agreement, there are fewer practices, fewer times where you can hit, which is when you really learn, when you really start gaining muscle memory. And we got coaches adding on more complexity, asking players to play multiple positions and so forth. Well, meanwhile, the way to get proficient at those things is decreasing the practices is how you get it. So does that concern you too when you talk about potentially moving a player to a different position?
I heard that Kyler Gordon comment with Dennis Allen, and I was trying to think about what he meant by that, because obviously we know that Gordon is the nickel. So then my thought, and I heard the word safety, and I'm like I'm not sure what is he trying to tell us here. I mean, he's not moving him to safety, right? He's more valuable as a nickel corner or even outside corner. So I'm curious in terms of what he's laying the foundation for there with Kyler Gordon. Now, again, Gordon's another one that I think, as we've seen some of his talents get better and better, he's not someone that's been really consistent, right? He's a guy that's been good when he's been healthy. Another thing is consistency is being available, right? So another guy that's like, you want to put him in multiple different spots, fine. Nickelback is where you get a lot of the action, right? I think they like him in nickel because of his coverage ability. They like him because of his physical toughness. They like him because of the way he blitzes from a nickel position. So I think that's why they like him there nickel. But I think for his long-term longevity or health, I think he's better served kicking him to outside. So maybe he'll be your outside corner. You bring him in on a nickel down to inside, and then bring in another corner, whether it's Tyreek Stevenson or if you draft a corner in this draft or get a veteran free agent or whatnot. So, multiple positions, maybe outside corner or nickel corner are what he's talking about. When he threw safety in there, that was kind of a little bit of something that kind of threw me for a curveball. I'm like, are you talking about like a nickel safety where he's a third safety on the field and you bring a different kind of cornerback? This is where I kind of like trying to see what Dennis Allen's thinking here. It's obvious they like Gordon a lot. It's obvious they're going to try to utilize him in multiple different facets, and they're going to try and have offenses guess in terms of where he's lining up, where he's coming from. Is he blitzing? Is he dropping back? What's he doing? I think that's the kind of the chess piece that Dennis Allen's kind of playing there with his head.
Yeah. J2K says, I have more concern for an offensive tackle to be athletic enough to play left tackle than how much they've played there. More often than not, offensive line can switch sides, but they don't always have the feet to play left tackle or right tackle power.
Right, true. That's also part of the traits there, J2K. Yeah. But obviously, if you're a kid that's that more so back then than nowadays, I would say, because nowadays a lot of these tackles are both sides, right or left, are athletic, and they're guys that because traditionally before we'd want the bigger, stronger, more powerful guy on the right side. But now it's like, you have edge rushers, like right defensive end, left defensive end that line up on either side. So your right and left tackles have to be able to hold up in pass protection. So I think that's not necessarily the case anymore. I think whether it's a left side or right side player, you want a guy that's athletic enough to be able to handle the edge, be out on the island there by himself, one-on-one versus a speed guy. And those are some of the things that I look for in my tackle, options, right? Do they have feet to be able to kind of, mirror and get to their set spots quick enough and be able to, recovery quickness if they're being inside to be able to kind of get back and at least, give the defensive lineman a push so that he doesn't have a clear shot to a quarterback. So yeah, I think left and right tackle, they got to be athletic. I think that goes without saying. And I think Darnell Wright is athletic enough to play either side. I like to see a guy have experience there on either side. Again, not saying they can't do it at all, but just to kind of throw him in there, for a guy like Membu, who's a young kid, who's never played left side of the offensive line, to kind of throw him in there and expect him to compete at left tackle at the NFL level, I think it's unfair for him, right? So that's why I say if you're going to do it, if you're going to draft Membu, then you have to move down all right to left tackle. That's the only option you have.
Interesting. Okay. Danny, I wanted to play this soundbite for you because, as you know, I've been on a crusade for 8, 9, 10 years now that the inside of the offensive line is as valuable, and in some cases, depending on the team, the strengths, lots of other variables, is more valuable than the outside offensive tackle. So
you're right. You're actually correct.
See that? Now, I've been saying it for 8-9 years, and I remember when I used to do a show with Shane Marsaw and Phil Otoshin, they used to laugh at me. Oh, you're ridiculous. And I told them, you guys are playing old-time football. The game is changing. It's about getting rid of the ball quickly. Now, this is Dan Rauscher of the Chicago Bears, a new offensive line coach, talking about that topic. I wanted to share it with you, Danny, so you can offer your thoughts on the other end.
I think it's inside out. I think that's the shortest, most direct path to the quarterback. You begin there. It's your ability to run the football internally. So center and guard play is obviously valued. But we also recognize that if we're deficient on the outside at the tackle positions, we're not as strong as we have to be. You can help tackles a little bit more than you can help inside play with some of your things that you do in your protections. But at the end of the day, we would like to be solid across the board, actually elite across the board, all 5 guys.
Yeah, like in what ways can that specifically really help a young quarterback?
Well, think about it. Right now, you give the guy the ability to step into the pocket, not out of the pocket. If it's not coming at me directly, and we dealt with this with Drew in New Orleans, very similar in stature with Caleb. The ability to step up, see the field, get the ball out, that's valued. And if I've got people to step away from or move because of penetration, edges, that becomes even more challenging for any quarterback.
Dr. Truth is absolutely right. He goes interior offense lineman over tackle. Aldo, enjoy your mic drop moment. Yes, that's what I've been trying to get a little recognition that, hey, I came up with a better thought than draft Dr. Phil and Shane Marsaw.
Although I've been saying it for a couple of years now. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like the inside of the offensive line is more important for these quarterbacks because, like Dan Rauscher said, is like you give them the safety net in case if the pressure is coming from the outside, you can step up into the pocket and you have that little fortified wall in front of you, and they can still now find receivers on the field and make plays. So that's why it was incumbent upon them fortifying and helping fix that interior of the offensive line. Obviously now with the additions they made via free agency and in trades, hopefully they've done that right. I think it's a major upgrade to what they've had in recent seasons. So that's a great a move there for the organization. And going back to tackles, that's why. Like what with Braxton Jones, and Darnell Wright, obviously they're not perfect, right? They're not. Neither one of them is going to be a Pro Bowl tackle, in my opinion, anytime soon. But as long as you can give the quarterback some time, right? As long as the defensive edge guy doesn't have a straight beeline to the quarterback, give him some time, give the defensive end a little bit of an issue there, and don't let him have a straight line again to the quarterback. You give him time, the ball comes out of the hands quickly. If there's pressure coming up, if they get beat on the outside, now you step up in the pocket, and that's why a lot of these tackles when I study them in the draft is all right. If they get beaten to the outside shoulder, are they able to recover? I talked about earlier about recovery quickness. I can at least get back into the frame and at least nudge or push or ride the defensive end past the quarterback, using his momentum and ride him past the quarterback, away from the pocket and allow the quarterback to step up in the pocket. Now there's a big gap to where that defensive end was. Now the quarterback could run if he's a mobile quarterback or just step up and find a receiver down the field. So I think this all started with Drew Brees in New Orleans. That was the big thing, which they always worried about that guard and center. Because Drew Brees, like Rauscher said, like Brees was a shorter quarterback. Yeah, he was listed at 6'1". He's more like 5'11", 5'10". I remember Drew Brees had to get on his tippy toes to throw the ball down the football field. So that's why that was done. And I agree. As long as your tackles are competent, they don't got to be all pros. They don't have to be great. As long as they're competent, I think if you have a fortified inside the offensive line, now I think you're good. Now if you have two young rookies, for example, and you have some holes in the interior, that's where you see what happens to guys like Justin Fields and the guys like Caleb Williams last year, where you have some, he doesn't know where to look, dropping his eyes or looking to get away because he just senses some pressure because he doesn't trust anything. Now, if he trusts the interior of offensive line, even if his tackles are getting beat on occasion, hey, I'll just step in the pocket, have my outlet release here or there or whatever, or continue to scan downfield and get the ball, because that gives you a little bit more time to let the receiver downfield get open or whatnot. So yeah, I think fortifying the interior of the offensive line, and then having capable or very dependent tackle play, not all pro play at tackle, dependent tackle play. I think it will help the offensive line get better. Now, obviously, like he said, you want all pros across the line. But we've got to be realistic in the age of salary cap and all that stuff. It's hard to get. It's not impossible if you draft well and you do scouting, you do all that stuff.
You have like 2 veterans with high contracts because they've earned it, and you got 3 young studs,
right?
Or that combination 3-2 reverse.
Yeah.
Real Bears fan asked an interesting question that I'd like to tackle first, Danny. So centers and guards will start to be higher picks and make more money than tackles? Not necessarily.
Right.
I think we'll see that gap between tackles and the interior offensive linemen decrease, where it will almost be the same. The key thing is that the tackles, because of the athletic traits necessary to play those positions, and there's fewer people in the entire world who have those traits, which is big mammoth guys, 6'4", 6'5", 300 plus pounds, incredible strength, very quick feet, ability to bend and so forth. All of those traits make them really important to find, and that's why they're paid well.
Right, exactly. And Real Bear fan, the guards are getting 20 plus million a year now.
That's right.
Trey Smith's going to get up towards 23, 24 million a year, right? Mm-hmm. So I mean that's getting close to tackle money there, right? So that's the thing, is like, it's like the guards are getting a lot of money. So yeah, a lot of teams are seeing the importance of those interior offensive linemen. That's why, if you can, like I said, Aldo, I think you laid it perfectly. Get 2 high-priced veterans to kind of fortify positions where you're weak at, and then bring in the young guys, whether it's, first, second, third round picks, whatever it is, and build the offensive line and have a cohesive unit that can play together for 3, 4, 5 years. That would be the dream scenario.
All right, before we get to our new final segment here, Danny came up with a great idea, and we're going to get to that next. I do want to play one more soundbite for Danny, and because you mentioned this earlier, you mentioned, why you love doing what you do. And one of the things that you mentioned was trying to figure out how to fulfill what the coaches need at certain positions when they come to you. I'm looking for this type of guy, this type of guy. Ian Cunningham answered a question on that subject. I want to share it with you, Danny, and we'll talk about it on the other
end. I think one of the best things that we did was when they first got here in February, we had DA and the whole defensive coaching staff come into the draft room, and they met with all of our scouts and all of our personnel, all of our analytics, and told us what they were looking for at each position. And I think it's super helpful just for our scouts, for all of us to be on the same page, to know what we're looking for. And we did the same thing with Declan and the offensive coaching staff. And then after that was done, Ben stayed in and was able to share his 2 cents as well. So again, that communication up front is super important. It paints a picture for us so that we can go out and get the perfect players for them.
Was there a lot of adjusting at that point? Because you guys start your draft preparation months before that.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of adjustment just in terms of, you're evaluating for a certain scheme. Offensively, it didn't change that much. Defensively, a little bit. But our scouts are awesome, and DA did an outstanding job of communicating exactly what he wanted. So for us to make that transition, it was fairly seamless.
We could spend 30 minutes just talking about what he talked about there, but we're running out of time. So let me ask you, what stood out there for you that you'd like to comment on?
Earlier, I touched on how calm Ryan Poles looks, and I think it's since Ben Johnson hiring, and I think he's got a staff now that is more direct and a little more clear in telling him in terms of what kind of players he want, right? This is the kind of receivers I like in the slot. This is the kind of outside receivers I like. This is the kind of tight ends I like. This is the kind of offensive lineman I want. This is the kind of defensive, DA would come in and say, this is the kind of defensive ends I want. So like now the staff, the scouting staff, they know what to look for, and the scouts know what to look for. So I think the previous coaching staff, obviously, Eberflus was a defensive coordinator, so he could probably tell in his vision in terms of what kind of end and tackle and all that stuff he wants. Still never got his 3 technique, right? But and in terms of offensively, it was just a pick your first time offensive coordinator de jour, guy that's a position coach, promoted to offensive coordinator, and he really has no vision, no plan for what he wants to lay out, other than the fact that, I'm bringing the Matt LaFleur offense, or I'm bringing the this guy's offense, and I'm going to run this offense here. Well, now it's up to Poles and everybody else. Say, all right, well, let's see what kind of players we're going to get for these guys here. So I think now it's different. Now he's got a staff that says, this position, this is what I want. This position, this is what I want. And I think the scouts and the front office have a clear idea in terms of who to value on their board and who to value in terms of prospects, so on and so forth.
Outstanding. I want to introduce a new segment that is the idea of Danny Shiman. And I proudly pronounce that because, I like to kind of be the idea guy, come up with the creative stuff. But he sends me a DM, say, hey, I got an idea. I don't know if you like this or not, but what about a segment called, let me play it.
Shimon says.
So that's what we're going to play. It's not Simon says, Shimon says. So I'm going to play that video till it annoys the hell out of you, and then going to go straight to Danny, who is going to tell us what Shimon is saying. Here we go.
Shimon says.
The Bears will draft a linebacker higher than any of us expect.
Wow. So you're talking Barrett Carter?
I'm talking about maybe, early day 2. Is probably what I'm thinking of, and it's something. It's because it's something that I'd heard previously. It's also corresponds with the TJ Edwards extension, and I do think that Edwards kind of has fortified his spot on the Dennis Allen unit, and I think the position that could be up for grabs will be the Tremaine Edmonds position, and I do think that if they get a fast, speedy linebacker, I do see them kicking Edwards inside to middle. In their base, right, and then obviously nickel they'll play Edwards and the young kid. So that's what I have a feeling that's going to happen. It's going to shock all of us.
Can you give me a name of a potential player? Not asking you to predict the guy, but a guy who would have those traits that would allow them to make that move.
Let me pull up my linebacker notebook here, because I have a bunch of players I can look here for. Actually, I think I might have it here on my electronic format real quick. But
because I was thinking Barrett Carter is the guy that
the kid from UCLA is a guy that everyone talks about.
Carson.
Schlesinger. I think I'm not as high on him, only because he's a 1-year starter. I watched his tape. A lot of his stuff, he was getting blown off the ball when he was taking on contact. He's a guy that potentially could be a very good linebacker, but I just want to see more. I think his body of work for me is not yet worthy of a high pick. But I think that's a guy a lot of people get high on or excited about. A couple of the players. Let me take a look at it. Where's my linebackers? So a couple of players I was looking at. Potentially like day 2, day 3. Demetrius Knight from South Carolina is a very active, highly intelligent linebacker. Shmuel Mondin Jr. from Georgia, very fast, very quick linebacker, a little bit on the small side. So I'm not sure if that exactly fits there as well. I know you mentioned Barrett Carter from Clemson. I like Jeffrey Bassa a lot from Oregon. Another guy that's about 6'1", 220, 225 pounds. So I think he's an athletic type of linebacker who fits that profile as well. So again, not saying it's going to be round 1, but I think it's going to be higher than any of us expected it.
Dr. True says Bears drafting Jihad Campbell at number 10 would piss everyone off. I was really high on the possibility of Campbell being an early draft pick for the Bears, but he's got a shoulder issue. And I just feel like any kind of, even if it's not a serious injury, perhaps we should avoid it with our very top draft picks. I don't mind taking a chance on a 3rd-round pick like Karana Amagaji if you really believe he's the best offensive lineman and he has an injury. But 1st round, 2nd round pick, I don't want to mess around with guys who are injured.
And that's one reason why I think they'll stay away from Josh Simmons, who was my top, if he's healthy, was my top offensive tackle. So, but Jihad Campbell could be an option if they trade down. So I wouldn't rule that guy out at all because of what he offers. He offers the athletic ability, the size. And the guy went to Alabama as an edge rusher. and was moved to off-ball linebacker because there are guys ahead of him that he couldn't beat out. So like, I'm going to get on the football field as an off-ball linebacker, switch there, and now he's a guy similar to in a way to Jalen Walker. I think Walker's more of a complete edge rusher, if you will. But I think with Campbell, his athletic ability, his ability as a blitzer. So if the Bears do trade down for number 10, Jahad Campbell is a guy to keep an eye on. Now, that's not what I anticipated by making the statement, but if you talk about him in the, 19 to say 20, 22, 23 range, I think that could be someone that will be in consideration.
Very good. All right, let's do it again.
Shimon says,
do not draft Kelvin Banks Jr. in the top 10.
I think you made that pretty clear.
Yeah, I mean I think that's already discussed it. We've beat that, horse to death already. But yeah, I do not want him to be at the top 10 pick. So
why is there so much love for this kid? I mean, he's a good player, but he's not a top 10. In most seasons, he would be bottom of the first half of the first round. Don't you think?
Again, he's a first round player. I'm not saying he's not a first round player, but that's not a top 10 player, right? So if you, again, another way to talk about what Campbell, if you trade down to say 17 or whatever, I pick a number in that teens or something, then you could talk about a guy you can probably bring in. You can give him a shot at left tackle, or see if he fails there and then kick him inside the guard. Like I said, I think he could play guard at this league, but it's just not top 10 worthy in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. There you go. Donald agrees with you. So let's do this again. It is.
Shimon says,
the Cleveland Browns will end tomorrow night with both Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders on their roster.
Oh, so you're anticipating a trade back into the first round by the Cleveland Browns so they can collect their quarterback. Are you thinking that it's possible they could be trading into the number 10 overall pick?
That would be a dream scenario for me if I'm Ryan Poles, because because they have the first pick in that second round. Now you can trade out of the first round entirely, get that second round pick, get a fourth round pick, which you don't have, and possibly, again, you have to do all the the evaluation, all that stuff, possibly get a first round pick next year. So I think that's where you can now build some draft capital. And now you have 3 second round picks, the first one in the second round, which is going to be highly coveted. So if you're Ryan Poles and if you're Ben Johnson and you see a player dropping, if that scenario plays out, the player's dropping in the 20s or whatever, that first pick in the second round will be highly coveted. You can always move back into the bottom of the first round and get the player that's dropping. So I think that's a win-win situation for the Bears. But the only thing with the Browns is obviously they're not going to want to go as high if they don't have to, right? So if, for example, if they think they could get, if they think they only have to worry about Steelers at 21, the only worry is about getting ahead of the Steelers, unless there's a mystery team that we don't know about that's past the Steelers that could come up and get Shedeur Sanders. But everything so far we heard is that 21 to the Steelers is probably his net there. That's as far as he's going to drop. So that's why I think they're going to try and, think about it. They have a $40 million defensive end. They have a fan base that's hungry for a winner, and you're going to go into next season with a $40 million defensive end, Deshaun Watson that is not going to play for you, making God knows how much money, and you have Joe Flacco as your starting quarterback. You need to energize this fan base. You take Travis Hunter number 2 overall. Now you come back and get Shedeur Sanders. Now you got the connection there. The only bad thing is for Kevin Stefanski, if he gets off to an 0-3 start, the Deion Sanders rumors are going to start flying away there in terms of bringing him to Cleveland and be the next coach. That's the only bad thing for Kevin Stefanski.
Well, and that is the bad thing for Shedeur Sanders, because so many teams are concerned about that could be one of the reasons, and maybe even the biggest reason Shedeur Sanders is dropping by people's estimations in this draft. It's the whole Deion Sanders. It's not just his bravado and how he uses the media to get his point across. It is the fact that he could be your successor, head coach Kevin Stefanski, head coach Brian Daboll, et cetera, et cetera. That's a really tough spot.
Another thing that they brought up about Shedeur is he hasn't been coached by anybody other than his dad.
Yeah, interesting.
So the accountability factor and all that stuff, so that's another thing that their teams are concerned about is he hasn't been coached by anybody else. So how would he handle tough coaching by an NFL coach? So that's why, but I think Mike Tomlin could handle it. So if he does go to 21 at the Steelers, I think Mike Tomlin is one that's got the moxie, he's got the skins on the walls that he could put Shedeur in his place, if you will, right? And kind of just dismiss those Deion rumors if it ever comes up.
Danny, which NFC North team do you see as a threat as far as the draft-wise draft this weekend? That's a question from Bare Minimum.
Well, if you just go by recent draft history of Bare Minimum, I mean, the Lions have been killing it in the draft, and I you know they're missing an edge guy. You know that's what they need, and if they jump up there and they get a, pick a guy, if it's Mike Green or if it's one of these other explosive guys that come off the edge for them as a pass rusher, I think that's would give their defense another leg up. Obviously, with the Hutchinson coming back from injury, I think that would kind of help fortify that defense. So I think the Lions are obviously a team, but more in depth with the Lions is like, how are they going to adjust in season with the new play caller? That's a question that's not for now, it's for later. But yeah, I think the Lions are a very good team in drafting. The Vikings do a pretty good damn team try as well in terms of getting some good value out of their draft.
But they only have like 4 or 5 picks.
Exactly. So they're a team looking to capitalize by maybe trading out of the first round and getting some more picks. But yeah, all those teams. The Packers. I've seen in terms of where they might go with that first pick. They're always they made some questionable moves for me this offseason in free agency. So we'll see how their draft goes. But in terms of just how the front office works and how they've done, I think that the Lions are a team that's always, at least recently, has really done a great job in terms of drafting.
I think that the fact that the draft is in Green Bay, there's going to be this vibe going on there. The crowd is going to go crazy for whoever it is the Packers are going to choose. And who knows, they might end up picking their first wide receiver in the first round in a long, long time. And if that happens, McMillan is there or whoever, that crowd is going to go bonkers. And
right.
As a Bears fan, I'm going to hate that moment. So I'm going to mute the TV and talk to Danny because we'll be doing coverage on the first round, the second round, the third round. Just Danny and myself, sort of like what we're doing here. Danny, you got another Shiman Says?
I got one more.
All right, let's play the little video. And it goes like this.
Shiman Says.
Kirk Cousins will be the starting quarterback of the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Kirk Cousins of the Pittsburgh Steelers?
Yeah.
Why do you say that?
So Cousins is waiting to see what happens in the draft, which team picks a young quarterback, and he doesn't want to go into a situation where he's going to be battling a young quarterback. So I think the ideal situation for Kirk is going to Cleveland. So, but obviously I just predicted that Cleveland's going to take Shedeur Sanders and come back. Get Travis Hunter and come back at Shedeur Sanders. So that takes him off that list in this scenario. That leaves the Steelers in there with no Shedeur. Now I knew they like Jalen Milroe, but not in the first round. So I do think that finally, not tomorrow night, but I think by that time this draft is over with, I think there'll be, some discussions there back and forth with Cleveland. Now the only thing that makes it a little bit difficult is it's the same division. I'm sorry, it's not same division. It's the money thing. It's taking the money and saying how much they're gonna pay offload, how much would Atlanta take, and what would the compensation have to be from the Steelers going back to Atlanta. But Kirk Cousins is gonna get traded, and I feel like the Rooney family is saying, I'm done with this hippie Aaron Rodgers. I'm waiting for this guy anymore. Let's get Shedeur, and if the trade that I've talked about happens, and then Brown snags Shedeur, then I think the Steelers go to plan whatever Z or whatever it is now, and I think Kirk Cousins becomes the starting quarterback for the Steelers next year.
Shedeur Sanders, from an NFL perspective, that's the biggest storyline going into tomorrow night's first round. Is he going to go a second? Is he going to go third? Is he going to drop to 21? All sorts of stuff surrounding Shedeur Sanders. That's what the national media is most focused on. What for you personally, Danny Shiman, is the biggest storyline going into tomorrow's first round?
Outside the Bears, you're talking about just in general NFL storyline?
Yes.
Interesting. That's a good question. For me, it's in terms of like where are these players? We talked about in terms of the star players. We talked about guys moving up, guys moving down. Everybody's talking about it's going to be a wild and crazy first round. There'll be a lot of trades, and we've heard it in the previous drafts, and we've had drafts that were supposed to be wild and crazy, and nothing really happens, and they're just go about their regular way. But a lot of teams have their original first round picks. So I think a lot of teams are going to, because of the way it's all set up, I think they're going to target players. Now, what players are going to be targeted? Obviously, typically the quarterbacks are targeted, right? Everybody says this is a down year for quarterbacks. So if no one's coming up for a Jackson Dart or Shedeur Sanders, who's going to come up with, right? Who are you going to come up for, right? Are you going to come up for a certain player like a Genty? Are you going to come up for a certain player like, a McMichael, for example, the receiver from Arizona? So I want to see, who makes the jump up and who are they jumping up for, right? And then kind of segue there with the Bears, where are they jumping to? Who are they picking? And if it's for example, that's why Ian Cunningham said he wants as many quarterbacks to go before the Bears pick as possible, because that just brings more players down. And that's what I want to see. I want to see who falls down to the Bears. So I was watching tonight, DJ Daniel Jeremiah did a mock draft, his final mock draft for NFL Network, and it was funny because the way he ran it, Jalen Walker was sitting there for the Bears at number 10, and that's when we've had a conversation here. I was like, that's a player I absolutely love, Jalen Walker. Mm-hmm. Now, is he an ideal fit? No, he's not ideal fit. But this is where we talk about getting some more speed at linebacker. This is why I talk about getting creative with Dennis Allen in terms of how he provides pressure. But in this scenario with DJ, he bypassed Jalen Walker because he wasn't a fit, and he went with Tyler Warren at tight end. Now, if you bring in Tyler Warren, how does that work with Cole Kmet and so on and so forth? So who drops, who comes up, who jumps up? Is it going to be a wild night in terms of trades and all that stuff? That's what I'm looking forward to seeing. Even Ryan Pohl said it's going to be a wild one. Hopefully it's true, because it's going to be fun for us to kind of watch this as we're going live here and saying, trade, we got this team. Oh, wait. And if the Bears are involved, that's even more excitement for the fan base. So I think that's the fun part for us is strategy, who's going where, who's dropping, why are they going here, so on and so forth. I think that's the thing that really captivates me.
J2K's biggest stories are Mason Graham dropping out of the top 10. The Giants owner steps in and forces who's the GM over there, Shimon, to draft Shedeur Sanders, and 2 tight ends getting drafted before a wide receiver, and also offensive tackles going quickly in the first round.
Yeah.
I can see all of those happen. Yes.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, the Shedeur one, the Giants, that's a little bit, I don't know. I mean, you would hate to force them to take Shedeur at number 3, where you could pass up a pass rusher like an Abdul Carter potentially, right? So I if an owner does that's you're really undercutting your GM and your head coach there, in my opinion. So I don't think Mara is that type of a meddling kind of owner. So I don't know if that one's gonna happen, but the other ones, I could see Mason Graham dropping out of the top 10. I could see him dropping down to the Bears at 10. To be honest with you, I could see 3 offensive tackles going in the top 10 as well. We were talking about Campbell and Mambu, and obviously there's some love for Kelvin Banks out there as well. So we'll see how that shakes out. But that's the thing that kept me like, who's trading up, who's trading down? Because right now everything's going to go chalk. You would think 1, 2, 3, and number 4 with the Patriots. That's where everything starts happening, right? Our teams now, for example, like the Bears. Are the Bears going to jump up to number 4, try and get Genty before the Jaguars get them, or before the Raiders get them? So I honestly thought when I heard Jaguars Genty, and I thought that's just a smokescreen because the Jaguars want to make the Raiders pay something to move up 1 spot to number 5 so that they can secure Genty. But now the more you hear it, a lot more people are saying Genty to Jacksonville. So we'll see how that plays. But if you believe it, if you're Ryan Poles and the Bears and you believe it and you really want Genty, you got to call the Patriots and say, what's going to take for us to move from 10 to 4? Because if you think about it, the Patriots are looking for an offensive lineman. If you drop down to 10 and you don't take Will Campbell at 10, there's a chance Will Campbell could still be available for you at number 10 if you're the Patriots.
Yeah. My number one storyline, because there's tons of storylines that I'd be looking at, but one of the most intriguing, and J2K knocked out a few of them, but one of the most intriguing for me is the Ashton Genty story. Where does he go? Our team's going to regard him as the Ezekiel Elliott of this draft. Elliott went 4th overall when he came out 9 years ago, I think it was. And Ashton Genty has been compared to Ezekiel Elliott in certain ways, and clearly as a top 4, top 5 player. So could he go, and could his value be that will have teams calling up those teams that have the 3rd, 4th, 5th draft pick if Genty's available, to see if they move up for him? And of course, for us Bears fans, are we in the mix there? Are those hints, whatever Ian Cunningham and Ryan Post were hinting at, does that have anything to do with Ashton Genty?
So here's a question for you guys and for you, Aldo, and for the people in the chat. All right, so say the Bears call up the Giants, say, all right, we want to come to number 3, and then they agree, and then Bears go up to number 3. Now, if you're the Bears at number 3, you God knows what you gave up, right? I don't even want to know, because it's going to probably make me throw up in my mouth here, because I hate giving up draft picks. But anyway, if you're number 3, how do you bypass Abdul Carter if you're the Bears?
Exactly.
I know there's injury concerns about his foot and shoulder, blah, blah, but assuming everything medically is cleared, how do you bypass a kid like Abdul Carter when you need a pass rusher opposite of Montez Sweat for a running back? I guess that's the question. We have to see if that happens.
That is indeed the big question. There are the Bears picks on the screen. First round, they got number 10. Then in the second round, they got 39 and 41. That should be it was his 3rd pick. So, and then in the 3rd round, 72. So they got 4 of the top 72 picks. That's pretty awesome. Danny, I keep getting this sense that Ryan Poles, when he made his draft picks last year, I forgot who it was, but that the person described it as arrogant. You're picking a punter in the 4th round. That's telling me that you think that this team is set and ready to go, and that the missing element is a punter. That's why you're drafted on 4th round. What I'm worried about going into this draft is Ryan Poles thinking that same thing, that because of the free agency acquisitions in the interior of the offensive line, is he satisfied with the trenches, something that he has been really bad at developing over his years as general manager? And is he going into this draft thinking that he can trade up because the team is only a player or 2, a dynamic player or 2 away from winning playoff games? What do you make of my concern?
That'll be a mistake on his part if he thinks his team's only a player or 2 away from winning playoff games. I mean, I obviously the excitement with Ben Johnson coming in and the new staff, but talk is great, but they have to go out there and prove it, right? And so for me, going back to last year, the punter, he was a top-rated punter. Everybody said he was the best punter in the class. And you had a different type of head coach last year. You had a coach who was a defensive-minded coach who liked to do the whole, field position thing and field position game. And remember that they're conservative defensive-minded coaches by nature. So this year with Ben Johnson, this is for me has been something where it's going to be more of a referendum on Ben Johnson in terms of what he wants. And so if Ben Johnson says go get Genty, it's not because Ryan Poles wanted Genty, it's because Ben Johnson wanted Genty, and he's got a vision for the player. So that's where I would say. But to your point, it's to give up draft capital to go get a single player, a running back, especially when the class is as a deep class. I think is arrogant because you're not one player away. You did some nice additions to the offensive defensive lines, but you're not done. By no means are you done, right? You still need to fortify some depth. You still need to get an edge player opposite of Montez Sweat. Now, I know you have big plans for Austin Booker. You signed O'Day from the Colts as a free agent, but still, you still need some reinforcements on the defensive line there as well. So it's just you cannot be arrogant at this point. You got to fortify those 2, for the offensive defensive lines, and then you can start going after some of these skill position players. Because remember last year, I think that was what was arrogant last year was trading a 4th round pick for Keenan Allen. That was to me arrogant because you give up a 4th round pick for an aging receiver who was in the last year of his contract, and there was no way he was gonna probably resign here. So he's still out there as a free agent right now at Keenan Allen. So that's the thing is like that was to me was an arrogant move as well.
All right. I think we're done for tonight. I can't ask you more. I can't beg you guys who are fans of the show and fans of Danny and myself and the work that we do here in the Bart Room. Barroom Network. I can't encourage you enough to stop by and check out our draft coverage. Danny is working super, super hard at being prepared to comment on all the players that are drafted. I'm working super, super hard at providing some creative and informational things that will keep you glued to what we're doing here for 3 hours, but I don't expect that. I do expect, or hope I should say, that you will at least give us a taste as to what we're doing. I want to read what Dr. Truth says here. I think Abdul Carter is a bit overrated. He has elite bend, cover skills, and excellent speed, but he has little power. He has no speed to power move and spends a lot of time on the ground. You got a thought on that?
I disagree, Dr. Truth. I mean, obviously, he's not a bigger guy, so he's not an ideal fit in terms of the length and size and defense. I mean, he's not a hand in the ground defensive end. He's more of that edge guy that comes off, with I talked about speed, first step quickness, a short area burst, but he's a guy that can drop back in coverage. You can do a lot of different things with Abdul Carter, but excuse me, I just, there's only two players, or maybe three, but I think two for sure that you could think of that could be impact players next year, and that's Travis Hunter, in my opinion, as a receiver, and Abdul Carter as a pass rusher. Now, in terms of speed to power, you put on Penn State tapes. There are times where he does convert speed to power, and he puts offensive tackles on their heels and he walks them back into the quarterback slap. So, I'm not sure which games you've broken down, but there's tapes and evidence that he can't do that. Now, he does have that injury, that shoulder injury that really hampered him toward the end of last year, and then obviously the hairline and stretch fracture in his foot that now initially it was going to need surgery, now it doesn't need surgery, and all these question marks have to be answered. Assuming that those are cleared by your medical staff and that they're he's good to go. And I think he's hands down one of the better players in this draft. And I can't see passing a guy that can make an impact as a pass rusher for a running back, especially when you have a running back class that's so deep.
Howie is sending in a question to you. He's typing it up now, having to do with relative athletic score comps. So as soon as that up, I'll have you field that, and then we can get out of here. I'll continue to plug Danny's work at Shiman Draft Scout. That's his YouTube channel. He's got about 50 videos now, right?
Yeah, I got another one coming up tomorrow morning as well.
Nice.
Derek Alexander will be up there as well. I'm going to try to get another one before the draft too. So we'll try to get it covered. I'm trying to be able to get, hopefully Bears pick one or two or three or more, as many players as you can. So that way you guys can go right to Shimon Draft Scout and hear my draft report on these prospects that hopefully the Bears select.
Well, and that reminds me that we totally forgot to talk about your mock draft, which you have a 30-plus minute video on Shimon Draft Scout about. But let's go over these really quickly, Danny. These are the guys that you picked. Will Campbell, available at 10, but you've been hearing that he may not be available at 10. Huh?
Yeah. Well, so it's funny because we recorded this, you and I recorded this on Monday night, and then Tuesday is when I heard that he's not getting past the Patriots if the Patriots stay at number 4. But, so we'll see what happens. But, yeah, Campbell, we talked about him, earlier, my top offensive lineman. I think he comes in, he competes for left tackle with Braxton Jones, with Karan Margaji. If he wins, then he's your left tackle. If not, then he's a backup for both left tackle and left guard, in my opinion, next season. Quinshon Judkins, we talk about the depth at the running back position. This is a kid, he's been a impact player the minute he stepped onto the college football scene. First 2 seasons at Ole Miss, over 1,500 yards. Second season, over 1,100 yards, back-to-back 15, 16 touchdown seasons. Goes to Ohio State, has a backfield committee, him and Travion Henderson, over 1,000 yards, another 10 or 11 touchdowns. He's got 50 touchdowns combined, passing and receiving over the last, his 3 seasons in college football, 45 rushing alone. So talk about a kid that between the tackles, downhill, physical running back. I think Quinshon Judkins, I think, fits that bill to be a nice compliment for with a DeAndre Swift. There's Alexander. I'm going to have his scouting report come out tomorrow morning, but he's a guy that intrigues me in terms of size, length, and athletic ability. 6'4", 305, 34-inch arms. Really stood out to me throughout the week at the Senior Bowl practices, not only in the one-on-ones where he flashed, but also in the team drills as well. Shows a variety of pass rush moves in terms of, a swim move, club, rip. You can line him up as a 3 technique to the outside shoulder of a guard. I think he can get upfield and be a gap penetrator and disruptor in the backfield. Elijah Arroyo, we talked about him a little bit earlier in terms of my tight ends. I'm a 4th-rate tight end only because he's been injured for a majority of his time at Miami, right? At a knee injury, kind of cost him a season and a half. another one of these Senior Bowl guys that really showed out. Big guy, as 33-inch arm length, 6'5", 250 pounds. Not a great inline blocker, but as a guy that has some nasty to him when he blocks, wants to embarrass guys, wants to put something on tape there where the guys are going back and watching, next day with their teammates and are like, damn, you got punked by a tight end. So Elijah Arroyo is a very competitive guy. Just staying healthy is his biggest thing. Billy Bowman Jr., talk about safety. Again, this is a kid, only about 5'10", 5'11", a little over 200 pounds, but runs a 4.4 40, is quick in his transition. Is a guy that we talk about, Dennis Allen likes safeties that are interchangeable. This is a guy that's comfortable at or near the line of scrimmage, also comfortable dropping back in coverage. Had 6 interceptions last year, 3 of which he returned back for touchdowns. I've talked about before, this guy gives me some little Mike Brown vibes for all those Bears fans. Remember those Mike Brown years. So, a guy that makes plays, also has some punt return, kickoff return ability as well on special teams. So, now going to 7th round, Chimere Dike is a receiver that was at Wisconsin. Is Wisconsin kid, went there for 4 years, transferred to Florida, had I think 40 receptions, 500 some yards, seven touchdowns. This is a slot guy, a guy that line up in the slot. And we talked about, the slot receiver's got to be physical. They got to be a playmaker. They got to be willing to block. And he's one of the, if not the better blocking receiver in the entire draft class. Will be able to come down and seal that edge from that slot position as a blocker. Has 4.37 speed. Another guy can get downfield and stretch the seam there and give Ben Johnson an option there. And as a slot receiver, a guy will give you some ability as a speed demon. Also has punt return ability as well. So another one that can give you some value as a special teamer. And Tim Smith is a guy that I absolutely love from Alabama. A 4-year player. The stats don't jump out on you on paper. I believe he has like 5 or 6 sacks for his career, but they use him in different ways at Alabama. More of a 2-gapping guy. But he just saw his athletic ability. You saw it at the Senior Bowl. At least I saw it at the Senior Bowl. And when given an opportunity to get upfield and be a gap penetrator, this guy was able to do it. There's times where they stand him up from a 2-point stance out on the edge and have him rush from there. So it shows you the type of athletic ability he's got. So I think this guy's best football is ahead of him. Worst case scenario is a 2-down, defensive tackle that can eat up space and be a really good run support guy in the middle of the defensive line. But I think he's got more to offer as a pass rusher. And sitting there in the 7th round, I think it was a great value for the Bears to snatch up there. And, I've been talking, guys, for months, heck, maybe even years, in terms of fortify the offense and defense and fortify the trenches. And of the 7 picks I had there, 3 of them were trench players. So I think that's what I hope the Bears do these next upcoming 3 days.
Great job, Danny. All right, so Howie asked us to stick around to compare these 2 players and their RAS. I'm gonna guess here, Danny, that you may not have had a chance to scout this player, but maybe I'm wrong because you really surprise me sometimes. The first player is Zion Johnson, offensive guard of Boston College. This is the one player that I thought maybe you haven't seen much of him.
This was the guy drafted a couple of years ago.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
He was I believe a 1st-round pick of the Chargers,
2022. Oh, thank you. Okay, so this is where Howie's going with that. All right, so he wants you to compare Zion Johnson with Jared Wilson, the center out of Georgia, and the RAS scores. Wilson's is much better, comparatively speaking, than Zion Johnson's.
Yeah, Jared Wilson is you've heard me talk about him in previous shows as well in terms of prior to the draft on tap episode starting. But he was my top rated center coming into this process, and he's a guy that's a highly athletic player, as you see by some of these. And RAS stands for relative athletics. I think relative athletic scores. Yeah, that's what it stands for. So he's a highly athletic kid. And, more of that wide zone stuff, offensive center kind of top guy can get to a 2nd level. But really to me has some development he still needs. Right, he's a guy that can he's got to get stronger at the point of contact. He's a guy that Walter Nolan we talked about in terms of the Ole Miss guy, the defensive tackle. Really just put him on skates when they played against Georgia. So he's a guy that highly athletic center. He's got good potential, but needs some development. Right, he's not a plug and play kind of play. But hey, if you get him in the 3rd or in the 4th or 5th round, day 3, he's a guy you can develop. Now the thing with Jared Wilson is I believe he can play. He's a center. He might be able to play some guard as well. So he gives you some flexibility there too. So, but he could be a depth guy initially, but definitely a guy athletically could play in this level, especially if you run a predominantly zone scheme. But he needs to develop. He's not ready to go yet, as opposed to Zion Johnson, who came out of BC as a guy that was ready to start. I believe he was playing left tackle for BC. He was kicked inside the guard with the Chargers, and if I'm not mistaken, he was a day one plug and play starter. Jared Wilson is not going to be a plug and play day one starter, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Great job, Danny, for you, to respond on that. Howie follows up with Danny. Would you dare take him at number 72 and have him back up Dahlman forever and take Jonah's job, save $12 million to maybe give to Braxton Jones? So he's really high on Wilson. How high on Wilson are you?
Well, I mean, Wilson, I've heard teams love him because of his athletic ability, and they know he's got to get stronger and all that stuff. But I mean, I've heard anywhere from his range could be anywhere from late second to late third. I mean, that's how. So I do expect him to go at day 2 of the draft. But I mean, it all depends how who have we taken? How many picks have we traded up? Have we given up certain picks that now we need to fill a certain position? It all depends, because I mean, Dahlman is a relatively young guy. I believe he's 27 years old, 28 years old. So he's hitting his prime. I understand you're looking for some depth there as well, maybe a young guy in the pipeline, but you do have Ryan Bates still, the veteran who could play left guard and center for you as well. So I again, maybe is the answer, but I'm always for fortifying the trenches. How you guys know that, whether offense or defensive lines. I got to see who's on the board, who's available before I say, all right, let's go get a guy that could be my starting center maybe a year or two down the road. After I just signed a guy for what was it, $14 million a year or $13 million a year, who's just hitting his prime of his career. So I think that might be a rich pick there at 72. Now, if he's in day 3 with your 5th round pick, now you're talking about some good value. So
there you go. All right, great stuff. And a lot of this discussion is going to continue tomorrow night and into Friday night, because we're covering every pick. And so in between, we'll have an opportunity to talk about issues, questions, comparing players and stuff. We're not going to spend, for instance, tomorrow, we're not going to spend all 10 minutes talking about the player that was drafted. We're going to divide that and talk about different topics and so forth. Danny and I are going to keep it close moving. It's going to be a total fun. And then I want to especially plug what we're doing on Saturday, because in connection with Bears Country Productions, we're going to mingle in our show hosts. We're going to share time on each other's network. We're also inviting some of our fans. So if you're interested in coming on and talking to Danny or talking to whoever might be on during that time, you might come on the same time Greg Gabriel is coming on. So if you're interested in popping in, just send me a DM at Barroom Network, and if you just leave a comment in the chat, I'll find out a way to get a hold of you, and we'll make that happen. So Saturday, it's going to be a true barroom feel where we'll have lots of cross communication, but also keep an eye on the draft and what the Bears are doing and any other big decisions that are made. It's going to be tons of fun. But I'm really looking forward to tomorrow, Danny. You and I are going to have a blast, and it's going to be one of the most dramatic. I sound like the guy from The Bachelor. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but every episode says this is going to be the most dramatic episode of The Bachelor ever. Well, tomorrow's going to be the most dramatic draft.
Jesse Palmer?
That is Jesse Palmer. Yeah,
you have a resemblance to him. Yeah, you do kind of look like Jesse Palmer.
Yeah, right. I wish. He's 6'5" and chiseled. I am 66 years old and getting flabbier by the second. But it's always a pleasure, Danny, and I can't thank you enough for all the hard work that you put in, your expertise, and how you articulate it to our fans. Excellent job, brother.
It's just fun. It's just the beginning. There's more fun coming tomorrow, and then Friday, and then more fun Saturday. So, I'm pumped. I'm excited. This is my Christmas Eve, guys. This is what I love doing.
All right. For Danny Shiman, I'm Aldo Gandia. We'll see you tomorrow at 7 p.m. Central for the start of round 1. It'll be Danny and me and a lot of great tape roll-ins and so forth. A lot of great communication with people in the chat. So we'll see you then. Take care, everybody.